Chapter 11:16. Rico tried to recall. She had indeed checked that guy's body. He was dead. His head was smashed into pieces and his brain was splattered all over the floor. He couldn't be more dead. However, she didn't think that Ling Feng was lying. She couldn't help but feel that there was more than one person who was like that guy. Originally, this strange thick fog didn't look like a natural phenomenon at all. At this time, Lizzie put her palm under the table. A white furry ball emerged from her palm, and then jumped out of her palm and landed on the ground. "Snow Fairy, walk around," Rico ordered in a low voice. The white furry ball quickly moved to the corner of the wall and quietly slipped out of the hotel. After a while, Ren Xiling and Ling Feng came back. Ren Xiling didn't say anything. She just said in a low voice, "We'll listen to Major Ling Feng's orders for now. Don't ask why, okay?" Rico nodded, and after a moment of hesitation, Ajiko also agreed. Outside the hotel, there were many people, adults, old people, and children. At this time, they were all holding a long rope in their hands to prevent them from getting separated in the thick fog. Ren Xiling walked to the back of the team and grabbed the end of the rope. She didn't choose to walk with Ling Feng. Ling Feng knew Ren Xiling's character very well, but how could he not care about it? At this time, 2 soldiers were quietly sent from the front to the back of the group. They converged on the road. Many soldiers rescued the trapped people from all over the town. They arrived at the town's gymnasium. When Ren Xiling and the other 2 arrived with Ling Feng, there were already many people gathered in the gymnasium. They were receiving some temporary supplies from the soldiers. There would only be more and more people, but the number of soldiers was fixed. Ren Xiling asked for help. She couldn't stay idle. Instead of letting her wander outside, it was better to let her do some logistics work here. Ling Feng let her do as she wished. At this moment, a soldier walked up to Ling Feng and whispered something into his ear. Hearing this, Ling Feng's expression turned serious. He instructed one of his soldiers to keep an eye on Ren Xiling and the other 2 before quickly walking out of the gymnasium. At this time, there were already 2 men in black suits waiting outside the stadium, and they seemed to be in a hurry. "You 2 are. We're from the administration. Here are our credentials." One of the men showed his credentials. Within the system, there were certain departments and certain seals that only a very small number of people knew about. Ling Feng was originally in the local army, but he was later transferred to the capital and became a major. He was still considered an official in the capital, so he had heard of some things. "You." Ling Feng returned the ID to one of the men and looked at them in confusion. Ling Feng could not help but think of the deaths of the innocent civilians and soldiers. The arrival of this mysterious department clearly showed that this was not a simple matter. "We are mainly here to help you evacuate." At this time, the man quickly said, "In this environment, if ordinary people don't have equipment, it will be difficult for them to move forward. Therefore, we need to use some ancient methods." Perhaps because they saw that Ling Feng's rank was not low, one of them directly showed off his skills and controlled a paper crane to fly in front of Ling Feng. This might be a small trick of the Tao world, but to ordinary people, it was completely supernatural and mysterious. Even though Ling Feng had experienced many storms, he could not hide the shock in his heart at this time. They quickly got to the main topic. "Actually, we were still on the way. This should have been our first stop. However, we didn't expect the fog to suddenly increase and accelerate when it was almost daybreak. We were about 30 kilometers away from here. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the fog had already spread to where we were. The speed of the fog's advance was hundreds of times faster than at the beginning." Ling Feng instantly realized the seriousness of the matter. "Both of you, let's talk inside." Ling Feng nodded quickly. Actually, they could communicate anywhere. Ling Feng just wanted to buy some time to digest this information. In the foggy streets, Wang, who walked alone, muddle-headed. He didn't know where he was going, and he didn't know when the number of people in this town had started to decrease. At this moment, a white thing suddenly floated over and quickly landed on Wang Hu's shoulder. The little thing's body was very cold. The moment it landed on his shoulder, a chill invaded Wang Hu's body. However, this chill only made him feel cool. "You are." Wang Hu took the little thing off his shoulder and placed it in his palm, revealing a smile. This little thing had a smell that was almost the same as pears. However, this little thing suddenly jumped onto Wang Hu's forehead and stuck to it. Wang Hu almost instinctively reached out to slap this thing away, but at this moment, he heard Pear's voice. This made Wang Hu's muddle-headed thoughts seem to become much clearer. "Can you hear me, Wang Hu?" Pear's voice rang directly in Wang Hu's ears. Wang Hu nodded and quickly said, "I can hear you, but didn't you tell me not to look for you? Why did you? It's like this, about what happened last night." Pear's voice seemed to be very low. "I just want to remind you that the matter of the guy you slapped to death last night is not over yet. Someone found a large number of corpses outside the town, and the state of death was the same as the one in the alley last night. And the time of the incident was early in the morning. Do you understand what I mean?" Wang Hu frowned and said, "You mean that guy is not dead yet? He should be dead. After all, he was beaten to such a state by you. If he could still come back to life, I would suspect that he had cheated. So, I suspect that he may have accomplices. In short, I just want to remind you about this matter. You should be careful. Also, don't look for me." Pear's voice suddenly stopped, and the snow fairy that stuck to Wang Hu's forehead also fell off and flew into the thick fog. Wang Hu subconsciously took 2 steps forward, but he quickly stopped, because this snow elf had actually fallen to the ground at this moment. Its body seemed to have been sliced apart by something sharp, splitting it into 2 halves. Wang Hu was shocked and hurriedly and carefully held up this snow fairy. At the same time, he anxiously shouted, "Pear? Pear? Pear?" However, this snow fairy did not respond again. At the same time, a figure slowly walked out from the thick fog. "This demon-like thing, is it yours?" Wang Hu raised his head, and the figure in the thick fog gradually became clear. He knew that the other party was less than half a meter away from him. A black suit, black sunglasses, and a black leather suitcase in his left hand. As for his right hand, it was holding a silver retractable stick. Wang Hu frowned and stood up. He was almost 2 heads taller than this black-suited guy. "Oh, big guy." This man was a little surprised at this time, and he quickly took out a black box the size of a makeup mirror from the suitcase, opened it, and aimed it at Wang Hu. But soon, this man used his hand to pat the box a few times, then shook his head and said with a helpless expression, "Well, this thing can't be used. Electronic devices are really unreliable." "Who are you?" Wang Hu frowned. The man looked at Wang Hu in shock, then slightly opened his arms. "I say, big brother, this outfit, these props, I don't need to say anything, right? This is the style of Miao Jinghong's administration." Wang Hu shook his head. Administration, he had never heard of it. Actually, he had heard of it once from Pear. "Are you serious? There are still monsters that you haven't heard of these days?" The man came closer and looked at Wang Hu up and down, then took off his sunglasses and frowned. "But why do I feel that you look a little familiar? You know me?" Wang Hu subconsciously grabbed the man's shoulder and asked. His grip was so strong that the man almost screamed out. This time, Wang Hu realized that he used too much force and quickly let go of his hand, looking apologetic. "Sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. I don't remember the past, so. Anyway, I'm sorry." The man was secretly shocked. He was wearing the latest protective suit developed by the administration, which could resist most of the impact. How strong was this guy's grip to be able to almost break his shoulder bone? "You really don't remember? Then, do you remember your name?" "Wang Hu, I only remember this." "Wang Hu?" The man scratched his head and said, "I haven't heard of any powerful monster called Wang Hu. But forget it, I won't mention this for now. Where are the people in this town? Do you know?" Wang Hu shook his head and said, I'm not sure, but they seem to have all gone in that direction, right? I can smell the scent of many people, and they are all heading in that direction. Wang Hu stretched out his finger into the fog. The man pondered for a while and looked at Wang Hu again, confirming that he had never heard of Wang Hu's name before. As a new agent in the administration, he was very hard-working and had long memorized the information of some powerful figures in the demon world and Tao world. However, this guy called Wang Hu looked quite fierce. Could he be some kind of big boss? However, the man quickly shook his head. Those big bosses of the Tao world and demon world were on the front line now. How could such a figure appear in this place? Moreover, this Wang Hu looked like an idiot. In that case, listen to me, the man said sternly. According to the contents of the agreement, when a major incident occurs in the country has the right to conscript all the people in the Tao world and demon world. Wang Hu, according to the 7th clause of the 6th chapter of the agreement regarding unusual and dangerous times, I'm now officially conscripting you to help me. Wang Hu blinked. What was this guy talking about? Don't you understand? I don't understand. The man opened his mouth and then said angrily, I'll say it. I'm now officially conscripting you. Do you know what conscription means? I'm asking you to do things for me. Wang Hu was unmoved. The man patted Wang Hu on the shoulder and said, Don't worry, big guy, I won't treat you badly. Since you helped me this time, I'll apply for a medal for you from the administration. This medal is a good thing. If you commit any crimes in the future, you can reduce some of your punishments. This medal was indeed a good thing. It was a method that the administration had specially developed to manage the Tao world and demon world. It was very popular among some small demons and low-level Taoists. Especially for the demons, if they could get a medal, they would have more authority and convenience to walk in human cities. Of course, for a newcomer like himself who had only been in office for a few days, the possibility of applying for a medal was almost zero. The man silently added in his heart. Wang Hu shook his head. I don't want any medal, but if you promise me that you can help me find out about my past, I can consider helping you. As long as it was because Li Zi had mentioned this administration, Wang Hu wanted to try to cooperate. No problem. Leave it to me. The man patted Wang Hu on the shoulder again. Let's get to know each other. I'm Bu Bu Gao. I'm the man who's going to be the head of the administration. Oh, you forget it. Bu Bu Gao shook his head and then looked mature. Wang Hu, listen carefully. I'm here with an important mission, so you have to help me understand. This is for the people and justice. My main mission this time is to support the troops and people trapped here. Bu Bu Gao quickly said. For some unknown reason, the thick fog spread faster, so the organization sent me, the Star of Tomorrow, to support. Based on what you said, I guess the troops here should have gathered the people temporarily. Let's hurry over and join them. After saying that, Bu Gao walked straight into the thick fog. But after taking 2 steps, he immediately turned around and asked, Well, which direction were you talking about? It's in this direction. Is it? I know, I'm just testing you. Bu Bu Gao nodded. Okay, let's not waste time. Hurry up. Let's go. This guy, there shouldn't be any problem, right? Wang Hu frowned and finally followed behind Bu Bu Gao. In the hotel, Father Song and Song Ying were anxiously waiting outside a room. The thick fog spread faster. They had already evacuated to a safe place, but it fell in an instant. But this wasn't the worst thing. The worst was Song Haoran. Song Haoran, who originally planned to evacuate again, was warned by the woman that Song Haoran couldn't be disturbed at this time. Otherwise, she wouldn't be responsible if he went crazy. Who knew what Song Haoran was doing inside? At this time, in the room, Song Haoran sat cross-legged on the ground. There was a thick fog around his body, and it expanded and contracted rhythmically with his breathing. Princess Chuyang's gaze was solemn. In one day, He directly practiced to the 6th level of the sky reaching floating diagram and didn't stop. This kind of talent is unheard of. No, this isn't talent. Chapter 11:17. There was an ancient saying that the emperor was the favorite of the heavens and the incarnation of the dragon. Therefore, he was called the Shinryu son of heaven. Naturally, this Shinryu was not the same as the Shinryu. The Shinryu son of heaven was just an abstract description. But even if it was just an abstract description, it was enough to highlight the nobility of the emperor's identity. There was also a saying that the Son of Heaven was protected by the Shinryu Son of Heaven and could not be invaded by any evil, and the so-called Shinryu Son of Heaven was actually the dragon vein. Every dynasty had its own unique dragon vein, big or small. The ruler of a dynasty was the carrier of the dragon vein's luck. When the dragon vein rose, the country's luck would be strong. When the dragon vein declined, the country would perish, and the Son of Heaven would also perish. As the former princess of the great Qin Empire, Chu Yang, who had enjoyed the pleasure of the emperor for thousands of years, naturally had the most direct experience of the emperor's dragon aura, this was not the ability of a feng shui sorcerer, but her own experience. Naturally, she would know when she encountered it. But because of this, Princess Chu Yang felt that it was inconceivable. The evil man in front of her, who had brought her out of the tomb, actually had the faint protection of the dynasty's dragon vein. Just as Princess Chu Yang was shocked by the origin of the Song Hauran, the clouds around Song Hauran's body suddenly surged again. In addition to the faint golden dragon aura, another strange power appeared at this time. Golden flames that were like the scorching sun at this moment, were jumping from time to time in the clouds outside Song Hauran's body. Princess Chu Yang only felt that this golden flame seemed to contain a boundless power. The moment the golden flame flickered, it even made Princess Chu Yang's mind surge and her qi and blood become unstable. Although she was weak, her spirit was actually incomparably strong. Because she had been sleeping in the stone coffin all this time, she relied on some kind of secret method to temper her spirit, which prevented her from going crazy from sleeping for too long. It was precisely because her spirit was so strong that she could clearly feel the terrifying power hidden in this golden flame, as if it contained a trace of an indescribable power between heaven and earth. Whether it was the Emperor's dragon aura or this golden flame, they were extremely powerful forces that were hard to come by in the world. At this moment, they actually hit the body of the man in front of her, really made Princess Chu Yang unable to maintain her calm. If Song Hauran's strange fate was placed in ancient times, perhaps a demon star of chaos. Princess Chu Yang originally thought that this was already Song Hauran's body, but at this moment, Song Hauran's body once again erupted another power that made her heart tremble. Divinity! There were gods in heaven and earth, and gods had natures. It was called divinity, a characteristic that only free gods had. Although this trace of divinity was weak, there was no doubt that it was real divinity. At this moment, the divinity was also wandering around Song Hauran's body. And the golden flame, as if wanting to devour this trace of divinity, constantly chased after it. And the Emperor's dragon aura that first appeared in Song Hauran's body flowed slowly and carelessly, as if ignoring the golden flame and the divinity, but became a buffer zone between these two opposing forces. The Emperor's dragon aura, the golden flame, and the divinity, these three powerful forces, actually formed a strange and delicate balance at this moment. But Song Hauran's expression was calm at this time. He quietly pushed the towering sky floating art to the 7th level. The 7th level of the towering sky floating art seemed to be Song Hauran's limit, or it could be said that this was the limit of his first cultivation. The white clouds in his body, accompanied by his breathing, were crazily sucked into his body, and the Emperor's dragon aura, the golden flame, and the divinity that were entangled with each other also gradually faded away. Young Master Song sighed and slowly opened his eyes. A flicker of a flame flickered in his eyes, and then it became clear again. Song Hauran twisted his neck, and his bones made crackling sounds. At the same time, there were pieces of hard shell-like material that broke and fell off his cheeks and neck. Song Howren frowned, and subconsciously stirred up the new and wonderful power in his body, and immediately shook off this layer of shell on the surface of his body. As if he had cast off his mortal body, Song Howren had never felt like this before. He felt as if every cell in his body had a crazily running engine, full of power. This is the power obtained from cultivating martial arts? How magical! Song Howren felt very satisfied with the new power in his body. Princess Chuyang, thank you for your guidance. Princess Chuyang? Princess Chuyang had turned around at some point, and scolded him in a low voice. Lecher. Song Howren lowered his head to take a look. At the same time that he shook off the dirt on the surface of his body, it seemed that he had also shaken off his clothes. Looking at the angry and embarrassed Princess Chuyang, the usually carefree young Master Song suddenly laughed evilly. Oh no, according to our current etiquette, a man's chastity is also very important. As such, I have lost my chastity, and can no longer marry a wife. Your Highness, please take responsibility. Princess Chuyang suddenly turned around, and said with a surprised expression, Are you serious? This secular etiquette actually, you actually dare to deceive this princess. Princess Chuyang had no choice but to turn around again. Young Master Song didn't expose himself at all at this moment, and his face naturally had a trace of an evil smile. How could Princess Chuyang not know that this shameless person was spouting nonsense? Maybe it will be true in the future. Song Howren laughed twice. When I have enough influence to influence the world, maybe my brain will go haywire and I will continue to promote it. Wishful thinking. Song Howren didn't care, and just casually put on the bathrobe on the clothes rack, and walked towards the door. At this moment, his eyes and ears were very sharp, and even through the door, he could clearly hear the footsteps, voices, and even breathing outside the door. His father and Song Ying were outside the door. Song Tianyu looked at Song Howren in surprise as he came out in a bathrobe. Seeing this, Song Tianyu couldn't help but open his mouth. Don't think too much, I didn't do anything. Song Howren heartlessly shrugged. When it comes to giving birth, let Song Ying do it. Behind Father Song, Miss Song Ying raised the middle finger in Song Howren's direction. Howren, what happened to you? Father Song naturally didn't hear this guy's tone. He really wanted to hold a grandson or great-grandson. However, he gave birth to this son himself, so he could naturally sense that Song Howren was different. It should be a good thing. At this moment, Song Howren said seriously, Let's not talk about this for now. Did something happen outside? Song Ying glanced inside the room, but didn't see the woman in the ancient costume. Ever since Song Howren picked her up, Song Howren had been watching over her, and no one else was allowed to come into contact with her. She could only quickly explain what had happened during this period of time. The fog has spread even more? Song Howren frowned. What did the two experts that Mr. Blind invited to lead the way say? They went out to inquire about the situation, but haven't come back yet. Song Tianyu shook his head and said, For now, I'll have someone stand guard here. Don't go anywhere. Song Howren nodded. After that, the family of three had a little discussion, but they couldn't come to a conclusion, so they ended this short family meeting. Of course, Song Howren didn't intend to let go of such a good resource like Princess Chuyang. He once again came to Princess Chuyang's side and got straight to the point. Princess, you should already know about the fog spreading outside, right? Princess Chuyang nodded. It could be said that she hadn't rested at all. She had been watching Song Howren's cultivation the whole time, so she naturally noticed the fog spreading. Song Howren pulled out a chair and sat down. Let's not talk about anything else. Your Highness, shouldn't you teach me how to walk in the fog? Walking in the fog had never been a problem for Song Howren, not to mention now, even before he started cultivating the Babel floating art, Song Howren had the ability to construct a three-dimensional map of the nearby terrain in his mind. Even in the dark, he could walk naturally, let alone in the fog. But he couldn't do it alone, because he had a family to feed now, so he naturally had to consider all aspects. But Princess Chuyang didn't say anything. Song Haoran said indifferently, "When this matter is over, and my family has safely left, I will naturally return this Sui Ho pearl with both hands." Princess Chuyang's eyes flashed with a hint of coldness, and she sneered, "Aren't you afraid that I will kill you after you return the Sui Ho pearl? I should still be of use to the princess, right?" Song Haoran said calmly, "The princess has woken up in the modern world, and there are many inconveniences. Song Haoran is willing to be the princess's pawn. The princess doesn't have to worry about me betraying you. After all, I still need the princess to teach me how to cultivate the Babel floating art. For this reason, I will naturally help you with all my heart. A combination of interests, each taking what they need, isn't that the strongest contract?" "The strongest contract, but also the weakest one." Princess Chuyang's soul was extremely strong, and even her gaze had the power to capture people's minds. At this moment, she was looking directly at Song Haoran, and Song Haoran didn't dodge or move at all. The firmness of his will surprised Princess Chuyang. She frowned and scolded, "Before that, hurry up and change out of your slutty clothes." Young Master Song smiled slightly and went straight to the changing room to change out of his bathrobe. After that, Princess Chuyang began to teach him how to walk freely in the fog. But at this time, no one in the hotel noticed that in the thick fog, a huge black shadow had appeared out of nowhere. It seemed to be a mountain. When the two visitors from the administration were brought to a room in the stadium by Ling Feng hadn't completely digested all the information, but the origin of these two people should be real. But no matter why the administration acted this time, and what was in the thick fog, for Ling Feng, the most important thing was to evacuate the local people. "The two of you, according to a rough estimate, there are about 30,000 people in the stadium now. Isn't it a bit too much with just the two of you?" "Haha, Major Ling Feng, don't worry." One of the men laughed and said, "It's just a way to find the way. There's no danger on the way. As long as we get out of the fog before it spreads, isn't it easy to get out of here?" That was true. Once they were out of the fog and back in the civilized world, they could use all kinds of transportation, so it was much easier to evacuate. But Ling Feng remembered the terrifying thing that happened in the morning, so he immediately asked, "The two of you, is there really no danger on the way?" They probably sensed the hidden meaning in Ling Feng's words, so they asked, "Major Ling, what do you mean?" Ling Feng briefly told them about the discovery of the corpses. The two people from the administration looked at each other and frowned. "Major Ling Feng, did you bring the corpses back? We want to see it with our own eyes. Please follow me." Ling Feng nodded and gestured for them to follow him. There were at least 200 to 300 people in the first batch of evacuees in the morning. Due to the poor conditions, not all of them were brought back. Ling Feng only ordered his men to bring back some of the corpses and the soldier who was still alive but had gone crazy. When the two men from the administration saw the corpses placed in sleeping bags on the ground of the equipment room in the gymnasium, their faces seemed to turn serious. There were bite marks on the corpses' necks, so their blood must have been taken from there. At the same time, the corpses were extremely cold. What a strong chill! There's still a trace of demon power left. Not only that, their essence, energy, and spirit were all sucked dry in an instant. Ice-type demon power, and it needs to suck the blood of living people. There doesn't seem to be any demon race that fits the description. Maybe it's a new demon race that took advantage of the chaos to come out and go crazy. Let's get down to business. You're right, Ling Feng only saw the two men's lips moving slightly, but he couldn't hear what they were talking about. He had no idea what they were talking about. After a while, the two men walked to Ling Feng's side. "Major Ling Feng, we've checked the corpses." One of them said seriously, "If I didn't see it, it should be the work of a demon on our wanted list. But don't worry, Major Ling, this demon is no match for us. If we encounter it, we'll take care of it directly. Ling Feng couldn't say anything when he saw how certain the two men were. After all, he knew very little about this relevant department. However, there was a saying in the circle of high-ranking officials. The administration was a special person who was one level above the officials. If there were no special circumstances, they would cooperate if they could. It couldn't be wrong. Of course, it's best to have your assurance. Ling Feng nodded. That's good. The two men nodded, then said, There's no time to lose. I'm afraid the fog will spread faster. We must evacuate the people as soon as possible. I'll have to trouble Major Lung to organize it. We'll lead the way for you. After that, we still have to support other places. The area of the closed disaster area is too big, and we have limited manpower. Thank you for your trouble. Ling Feng nodded and immediately turned to leave. The two men from the administration looked at Major Ling Feng, who was leaving, and a strange smile appeared on their faces. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 11-18. What made Taiyinzi panic was that it seemed to have become air in the eyes of Miss Maid. How to say it? For example, Taiyinzi deliberately appeared in a very conspicuous place. Miss Maid was cooking the master's meal in the kitchen. Taiyinzi, who had rolled back and forth in the kitchen several times, still didn't get Miss Maid's attention. For example, he deliberately rolled under Miss Maid's broom, and then was swept into the garbage, spatula-like garbage. Still didn't get Miss Maid's attention. No matter how to strike up a conversation. Of course, it was impossible to speak ill of her, and it would never happen. It seemed that he really had no sense of existence, completely transparent. But this was obviously not something to be happy about, because the more it was like this, the more Taiyinzi worried about his future. I was wrong. I was really wrong. Miss Yu Yi, I shouldn't have taken things to the Penglai treasure house without permission. I was really wrong. Taiyinzi cried bitterly. Miss Maid seemed to think of something. She suddenly opened the cabinet, took out a decoration from inside, and carefully wiped it. I was wrong. I was really wrong. I shouldn't have left during work without permission. Please punish me. I am willing to accept any punishment. Taiyinzi knelt down and begged for mercy, looking up at Miss Maid's chin with his dog head. What should we eat for lunch? Miss Maid was holding her face at this time, as if she was wandering in the void. I was wrong. I was really wrong. I shouldn't have lost the body of the Black Soul Messenger, and even been put into this dead dog's body. I was wrong. I have embarrassed the master and you. Perhaps he had never been so pious and ashamed in his life. How about challenging the osmanthus floss? Miss Maid said to herself. I was wrong. I was really wrong. I was really wrong. Madam Supervisor, the most beautiful Miss Yu Yi in the world, I really know that I was wrong. I shouldn't have used you as the prototype to join the Dark Maid without permission. I shouldn't have used it as an extension to prepare a mod. So it wasn't just a boss, but an entire mod. Finally, Miss Maid lowered her head with a smile and looked at the lunar dog who was crying on the ground. Taiyinzi suddenly widened his eyes in horror, his whole body trembling. Ashy, 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 ashy. The Taiyinzi opened its mouth, and its tongue stiffened. It felt as if cold sweat had started to slide down its smooth metal body. It had unknowingly said it. The biggest secret? Taiyinzi, Miss Maid suddenly called out softly. Here! Taiyinzi immediately stood up straight. We've been spending a lot lately. What do you think we should do? This. Taiyinzi took a deep breath and said passionately, facing this situation, I think we should work harder. Strive to find more customers for the master. That's right, we still need to generate revenue. Very good. Miss Maid nodded, but these seem to be a bit slow. Taiyinzi's heart skipped a beat and he quickly said, Not only do we need to increase revenue, we also need to cut off revenue. I won't hide it from you. Yu Yi, Miss Maid. I sincerely want to serve you, boss. The boss is simply my second parent. It can be said that without the boss, there would be no second life for me. I will continue to be trapped in the white jade token forever. I feel that serving the boss for 500 years is not equal to the kindness that the boss has shown me. 600 years? No, no, no. 1,000 years. I want to extend the service time to 1,000 years. No. It's not enough. We are the most servants. How can this be enough? I've decided that from now on, my salary and year-end bonus won't be given to me. For the boss. I didn't know that Taiyinzi is so loyal that I'm almost inferior to you. Miss Maid smiled gently, but the service time is set by the master. If you want to extend the service time, you need to get the master's consent. Taiyinzi secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Miss Maid changed the thread of discussion at this time. However, I approve the rest of your request. You don't want transaction performance or benefits. You're really a model worker. That's of course. My heart hurts so much. Are you talking about something interesting? At this time, Boss Luo's voice appeared at the stairs. Master. Seeing Luocio come down, Yu Yi quickly turned around and meticulously followed the etiquette of a maid meeting the master. Luocio walked over slowly. Miss Maid smiled at this time and said, Nothing special. Taiyinzi just said that he thanks the master's kindness, so he decided not to ask for performance commission and employee benefits in the future. He also said that if possible, he hopes to increase the service time to 3,000 years. Taiyinzi raised his head in despair and looked at the maid. Mississippi, 3,000 years? Luocio opened his mouth slightly and looked up and down at Taiyinzi. He smiled slightly and said, It's rare that you have this kind of heart. It's really good. Master, you flatter me. This is what I should do. 3,000 years, I still think it's too short. Luocio looked at Taiyinzi for a while and nodded. As for the service, let's talk about it when your original term ends. As for the performance commission and benefits, well, it's okay. Luocio waved at Taiyinzi. Suddenly, a black fog wrapped around his body and disintegrated his metal dog body little by little. You lost the body of the messenger. Now I'll help you create another one. As for the cost, it will be offset with your future performance commission and benefit. When you pay it off, you can continue to enjoy the normal treatment. The new Black Soul Messenger's body was no different from before, because it was made of the leftover scraps after the transformation of Nero. When the familiar afro hair came back again, Taiyinzi suddenly rolled back to the main engine room with tears in his eyes. He seemed to have recovered some vitality. Looking at Taiyinzi's sad appearance, Luocio sighed and looked at Mississippi Maid. The profit of the God King plan is very high. If it continues, the performance commission will be enough for Taiyinzi to obtain power beyond the limits of this world, right? Yes. Mississippi Maid smiled and said, It's rare for him to be so loyal. Luocio shook his head, scratched Mississippi Maid's nose and said with a smile, Is Miss Loya awake? Mississippi Maid asked softly. If she wakes up naturally, it will take a few more days. Luocio said casually, Let her wake up naturally. At this moment, the door of the lobby opened with a click. Taisetsu and Nero came back with big bags of things. Nero's mood had been very high, perhaps because his body was relaxed. Boss, we have a big harvest. The supermarket doesn't need money. Taisetsu and I have brought back a lot of things. Is everyone in this town gone? Luocio looked at Taisetsu and asked. Taisetsu said, We walked around and couldn't find a living person. But we found a lot of corpses. They should have died accidentally when they were escaping. Because there was no living thing nearby, it was naturally difficult to find customers who walked to the club by themselves. So after returning from the Penglai treasure house, this place seemed to be very idle. Of course, there were many solutions. For example, moving the club to another place again. For example, restoring this place to its former state. But Luocio was not in a hurry to make a decision, because there was still a large amount of money waiting for him to collect outside. Su Zijuan's transaction had been completed, but it was done by signing the bill. So, it was reasonable to pay the bill. This time, Luochio left directly with Nero. Nero couldn't help but roll her eyes. She walked to Luochio and whispered, "Boss, are you jumping crazily on the edge of whether your Miss Marionette will kill me or not? His heart is really not ordinarily bad, huh? Didn't you say you want to be my person?" Luochio said indifferently, "Then, it's my freedom to use you, isn't it?" Nero was stunned and couldn't find a reason to refute. She silently watched Luochio walk into the thick fog. "Why do I feel that the boss is the most evil?" Nero shook her head and quickly followed. They soon disappeared into the thick fog. At this time, Miss Maid slowly closed the door of the club. With her back to the door, she slowly locked the door and watched it gently. Only Taisetsu was left in the lobby. At this time, he hesitated and said, "Well, Miss Yuyi, do you want to go too? I can guard the door." "No need." Yuyi shook her head and looked at Taisetsu. "I have to take care of Miss Le. But Taisetsu, can you do something for me? This is originally the job of number 18, but she is not here at the moment. Is that okay?" Taisetsu nodded. "No problem." Modern technological products couldn't work in the thick fog, but ancient methods weren't affected. In the thick fog, a huge shadow was moving rapidly. If one looked closely, he would find that it was a huge black wolf. This was a special creature of the underworld raised by Ghost Baby, Ghost Wolf. Ghost Wolf was born to run in the dark. Obviously, the thick fog didn't hinder its nature. At this time, Ghost Wolf was carrying Long Shiro, Su Zijuan and Jessica. This bead? Su Zijuan was holding Chichi Kamaya's secret treasure, which was the reason why Long Shiro could still keep part of her combat power. Now that her status had been exposed, Long Shiro didn't intend to hide it anymore. As for the fact that Kelowna and Shinryu needed the bead to show their divinity, Long Shiro wasn't afraid to let Su Zijuan know that it would make people in the demon realm and Taoist realm panic. She took the bead back from Su Zijuan's hand and held it in her hand. Su Zijuan couldn't help frowning. "Now you can't get nourishment from the earth. Chichi Kamaya can help you make potions to replenish your chi and blood. But how many herbs can match your Shinryu's blood? I don't want to nag you, but if this goes on, your blood will be used up sooner or later. Don't you know the consequences? It's better than nothing." Long Shiro shook her head. Su Zijuan snorted. "Since this is the work of that shop, the one who started the trouble should be the one to end it. The next time we meet, I'll buy it for you." Long Shiro glanced at Su Zijuan and suddenly said, "You're using those evil souls in the secret seal, right? Since the era of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, the Xianyuan royal family has sealed countless evil souls. Is this what you're relying on?" Su Zijuan pursed her lips. "Anyway, these evil souls are still seals, and it's hard for us to destroy them. Why don't we make use of them? That shop owner likes these things, doesn't he? Since he likes them, and I can't use them, why can't I use them?" Long Shiro was a little angry. "You know, there are many evil souls sealed in the secret seal, but have you forgotten that there are many heroic spirits of the Xianyuan royal family's soldiers? Do you think that Xianyuan doesn't have to pay any price to seal these evil souls? Every seal, every battle of the evil spirits, there are countless warriors who step forward one after another, using their lives and souls to delay the evil spirits, so that we can seal the evil spirits again and again. It's not that we can't destroy the evil spirits, but once we destroy them, it's the same as destroying the temporary heroic spirits as well. As the princess of the royal family, you don't think about how to save these heroic spirits from the seal, but instead spend them extravagantly? Then tell me, how many years will it take to separate these heroic spirits from the evil souls?" Su Zijuan snorted. 1,000 years, 2,000 years? 2,000 years. Have you succeeded? 2,000 years, you who willingly accepted the inheritance and became the Shinryu. Have you succeeded? This doesn't mean that I won't succeed. Long Shirua also snorted. Su Zijuan laughed. What bullsh *t fate of the royal family of Xianyuan? What bullsh *t daughter of the emperor? Are we born to bear these? Why do we have to bear these things? Why do we have to sacrifice ourselves for this world? Zijuan. Enough. Long Shirua shouted angrily. Su Zijuan wasn't afraid. She looked straight into her eyes and didn't try to avoid it. Noticing the explosive atmosphere between the two, Jessica hurriedly waved her hand and said, "Guys, can you not do it at this moment? Don't you have something important to do?" Long Shirua glared at Jessica and said impatiently, "Don't be capricious. Don't get irrelevant people involved." Su Zijuan didn't give in at all. "Anyway, I've inherited it. I can do whatever I want with it. It's none of your business. If you really want to interfere, then take it away from me. If you don't like me, you shouldn't have." She was interrupted suddenly. "Look!" Jessica exclaimed and pointed to the front. The ghost wolves stopped at this moment. There was a cliff in front of them. They looked around and found that the thick fog in front of them had disappeared in an instant. It didn't disappear. It was just that the thick fog didn't invade this place. It turned out that there was such a spacious place in the thick fog. Long Shirua and Su Zijuan looked down at the bottom of the cliff. At this moment, the bottom of the cliff was densely packed with people. At first glance, there were no less than 100,000 people. In the center of the ground, there was a huge hole like a sinkhole. At this moment, the hole was emitting scarlet light. Chapter 11:19. It was like a monster's huge mouth, swallowing one living person after another, but the living people didn't know what was in front of them. They didn't look frightened, but rather calm, or perhaps they were delirious. What are they doing?" Jessica asked in fright. "I'm afraid it's a method to refine souls." Su Zijuan frowned. "Something is swallowing the spirit of these living people at the bottom of the giant pit. If one looked carefully, they would see living people walking in from all sides of the thick fog. Among them, there were more than 10 guys in black clothes and bronze masks. Each of them held a bell in their hands. As the bell rang, the footsteps of the living people gradually quickened. Like escorts, they led the living people who were slowly walking into the thick fog to the edge of the sinkhole, and then jumped in. These bastards! How dare they do this? Long Shirua gritted her teeth. The secret treasure in her hand was shining slightly. Damn it! All of a sudden, a dragon's roar rang out from the cliff. After that, a golden figure rushed directly toward the crater like a falling meteor. "Master?" Jessica was shocked at the scene. Su Zijuan said indifferently, "The people are the bottom line of this country, and also the capital she uses to guarantee the survival of the Taoist and monster realm in Kelowna. Once the government of this country knows about this, I'm afraid it'll be a devastating blow to the Taoist and monster realm." "But Master, the power of the Transcendents is too strong. If the Transcendents fight with all their strength, even if they don't fight to the death, as long as they escape," Su Zijuan said faintly, "humanity is in power now. If these guys insist on standing on the opposite side, I'll kill them one by one." While Su Zijuan sighed faintly, Long Shirua's roar resounded through the sky. "You bastards!" The loud and clear roar instantly shattered the bells in the hands of the dozen or so black-clothed men. Without the ringing bells, the slowly advancing crowd fainted on the ground. At this moment, above the crater, a golden dragon shadow was glaring furiously at the ground. "It's Shinryu! Why is she here?" Suppressed by Shinryu's unparalleled might, the 10 or so black-clothed men looked up at the same time in fright. Shinryu was unrivaled. This was the consensus of the entire Kelowna Taoist and Yao realm. At this moment, the dozen or so black-clothed men were enveloped by a golden light and were pulled into the air. "Do you know what you're doing?" Long Shirua's voice was like thunder. "Who gave you the guts to touch these ordinary people? Heaven's Heart 71 generation? Tell him to come out and see me." Within the dozen or so light barriers, the black-robed men were all silent. Roar! The enraged Shinryu roared once again. His loud voice was like a shockwave that shook the earth. However, at this moment, one of the black-clothed men suddenly said in a deep voice, "Shinryu, what are you protecting? Is it this Kelowna or a creature of Kelowna? If it's a creature, we're also one of them." Roar! Tell Heaven's Heart 71 generation to come out? Way! Pilgrimage! Go! Ultimate technique! Instantly, one of the black-clothed men raised his arms and shouted. Meanwhile, his body expanded crazily with surging spiritual energy like a volcano that was about to erupt. He broke the light barriers around him. "You're crazy! You destroyed your own Tao foundation!" Before Long Shirua could react, the other black-clothed men who were imprisoned also shouted the same word. They burned all of their spiritual energy and broke free from the light barriers. After breaking free, they didn't choose to fight against Shinryu in Kelowna. Instead, they rushed into the crater without hesitation. They chose to merge with the thing in the crater, as if they had jumped into lava. Their figures were instantly wiped out. Instantly, the crater shone with red light, and a blood-red bead gathered rapidly in the bright light. Long Shirua roared and rushed into the crater with her huge body. However, when she was about to grab the red bead, the space suddenly shook, and the red bead disappeared in front of her. Wang! It was the power of the dragon bloodline, the power of Wang. Instantly, the dragon's roar broke out of the crater with boundless anger. Su Zijuan slowly landed beside Long Shirua. At this moment, Long Shirua lowered her head and looked at the crater without saying a word. "It's so good." Su Zijuan also glanced at the crater. Suddenly, she stretched out her hand and a piece of broken bronze mask flew into her palm. Su Zijuan covered her face with the bronze mask and looked at Long Shirua from head to toe. "You said it's so good? At least I feel like I'm alive." Su Zijuan still looked at Long Shirua through the mask. "It's better than waiting for death without any hope, isn't it?" Long Shirua clenched her fists, then turned her head and flew away, disappearing into the dense fog. Su Zijuan looked at her silently with a cold face. "You want to protect both sides, but there's no such thing as having the best of both worlds. Anyway, I don't have the right to criticize you. After all, I'm just a puppet of humanity." From afar, Jessica ran over quickly. "Master, where did Mississippi Long go?" "To be silly," Su Zijuan said indifferently. "Don't worry about her, she's going through menopause, so she's grumpy." Jessica gave a start. She couldn't understand the relationship between Su Zijuan and Long Shirua. "Then, shall we catch up with her now?" "Catch up?" Su Zijuan shook her head. "There's no need to catch up with her. The debt collector has come to our door." She looked to the side. Luochio appeared on the ground full of people who had fainted. He walked towards Su Zijuan slowly. Of course, there was Nero behind him. "Miss Su Zijuan, are you free?" Boss Luo finally came to Su Zijuan and greeted her politely. Of course, he also nodded to Jessica slightly. "I'm not free, treat me to dinner another day," Su Zijuan said directly. "Do you want to chase me? Just give me dozens of times of Cain's blood as a greeting gift. I'm very busy." Hearing this, Nero blinked his eyes as if he saw something interesting. His attention was attracted by this girl, who looked like a young girl. "Then, I'll hold a banquet for you another day, Miss Su Zijuan." Luochio smiled. "Of course, I'll cook by myself." "Tut!" Su Zijuan snorted and waved her hand. In a split second, 4 light patterns appeared around her. Then they shot towards Luochio. Luochio stretched out his hand and took them into his palm. Su Zijuan said, "This is the key. I've told you the location. Hurry up and move it away." "The number is correct." Luochio nodded. "Thank you very much for your patronage, Miss Su Zijuan. Then, I won't disturb you anymore." It seemed that he only came to collect the debt. When he got the thing, Luochio left with Nero without any hesitation. Su Zijuan frowned. "Wait a minute. Excuse me, is there anything else I can help you with?" Luochio turned back. Su Zijuan pondered for a moment and suddenly walked to Luocio quickly, whispering something to him. At this moment, Boss Luo, who had a calm heart and the emotional stripping of the club, couldn't help but open his mouth in astonishment. Miss Zijuan, are you serious? Su Zijuan sneered. What? You don't dare to sell it? That's not it. Luocio shook his head. It's just that, can you confirm it again? What you said just now, do you really want to make a deal? Deposit? Su Zijuan narrowed her eyes. She waved her hand once and a light pattern was formed in front of her. This is from the South Sea. Okay. Boss Luo nodded. Of course, there was no reason not to earn money. Thus, an ancient scroll opened up in front of the two of them. Su Yuqian slapped his palm on it without hesitation and said happily, "Then I'll be waiting for your performance. Remember to work hard." Watching Su Zijuan flew into the thick fog with Jessica, Luocio stood there for a long time without saying anything. Nero only heard her boss muttering, "It seems that you can really do whatever you want with money." When Bu Bugao and Wang Hu came to the gymnasium, they found that there was no one here. But Wang Hu said that there was a lot of human smell left here, so they should have left not long ago. Bu Bugao couldn't help but search around the gymnasium. Strange, did the troops here start to move? Bu Bugao furrowed his brows. Or could it be that someone has already arrived a step earlier and left with the others? Why, don't you know how many people you have? Wang Hu couldn't help but ask curiously. He just couldn't remember what happened in the past, but his logical thinking was still very normal. Bu Bugao shook his head. "Big brother, look at the situation. We lost contact a long time ago, okay? But if it's our people, if they moved, they should have left some marks for later people to know. But I didn't find any marks. I only found a few frozen corpses." Wang Hu glanced at the basketball court in the gymnasium. There were used materials everywhere. They should have left not long ago. It won't take long to catch up with them. Do you want to follow them? Of course. Bu Bugao said righteously. You don't know how dangerous this road is. How can I abandon it? Follow them to get credit, or else how can you get promoted? Then you'd better hurry. Wang Hu nodded and said, "I have a feeling that something bad is going to happen." Something bad? Wang Hu shook his head. "I can't say for sure, it's a kind of uneasy feeling. In front, there seems to be something in front. Everyone, don't get separated, maintain the formation. Don't mess around. Don't panic. We'll always be here. We'll protect everyone." In the thick fog, there would be the sound of soldiers shouting from time to stabilize the mood of the crowd. Not only that, this team had more than 40,000 people. Originally there were only 30,000 people, but later the soldiers outside brought back many more. A team of more than 40,000 people could fill up a long street. The team was extremely long, and because there was no equipment, the soldiers could only shout at the top of their lungs to ensure that everyone could hear them. Damn it! Whoever says that our country's soldiers are bad, I'll go back and write about them. Subeditor Rin said emotionally. Of course, the way she expressed it made Li Zi roll her eyes. However, this team had already walked for more than 2 hours. To the soldiers, it was naturally not a burden, but to the civilians, 2 hours of walking was hard to say. Perhaps they would only be a little tired normally, but under this oppressive and fearful state, many people were already mentally and physically exhausted. The team's speed was also getting slower and slower. At the front of the team, Ling Feng frowned and looked at the two people from the administration. "The two of you, we've walked for more than 2 hours, why don't you rest here for 10 minutes? There are many elderly and children here, and there are also pregnant women." Hearing this, one of the men from the administration said coldly, "Major Ling, I know you're worried. But I'm sorry, we definitely can't stop. You know how fast the fog is spreading. Any stop might cause us to be unable to keep up with the speed of the fog. Do you want to never walk out of here?" Ling Feng also knew that this person was right. As a soldier, he knew that speed was the most important thing in war. "All right then." Ling Feng nodded. However, he ordered his deputy beside him in a low voice. You go, get the men to put down the unnecessary things first, and get the brothers to carry the elderly, children, and pregnant women who can't move freely. We can't slow down the speed of our evacuation. Make it harder for the brothers. Roger. The deputy quickly ran to the back. Major Lung, you're really dedicated to the people. The man from the administration smiled and praised. Ling Feng said indifferently, the human heart is made of flesh. We're soldiers, and during wartime we have to be tough. But now, when it's time to be soft, we have to be soft. Ha! The other man suddenly laughed. Major Ling, I have a way to make everyone less tired. Oh? What's a good way? Ling Feng was suddenly energized. The man opened his suitcase and took out a bell from it. At the same time, another man also took out a bell that was the same as the one in the suitcase. Ling Feng could not help but ask, what's the use of this thing? When people feel tired, it's because they feel tired mentally. The man chuckled and said, so it's very simple, isn't it enough to make their minds not feel tired? This ringing bell can make the person who hears it forget everything and not think about anything. Think, 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 think. As the man shook the bell in his hand, the word think kept ringing in Ling Feng's mind like an echo. Chapter 11:20. Ling Feng, who was on the verge of collapsing, suddenly pulled out his gun and pointed it at one of the men from the administration. However, the crosshairs were moving in Ling Feng's sight at the same time. Double shadows, triple shadows. He found that his body was very heavy and gradually lost control. Ling Feng shook his head hard, but it didn't help at all. Just when he was about to pull the trigger, the man in front of him quickly rushed forward and punched Ling Feng's abdomen. The severe pain made Ling Feng lose his consciousness, and he finally lay on the man's shoulder. This guy's willpower is really strong. The man shook the bell in his hand. Ling Feng, who was motionless, slowly stood up, but his eyes were blank. He is outstanding among ordinary people. After all, he is a soldier. Another man said indifferently, well, I'll go to the front and take a look. You take care of him. Don't worry. It's much easier to control Ling Feng. He smiled. The man who was about to leave nodded and said in a low and strong voice, for the future. He also whispered, for the future. The sound of the bell was like spring water gushing out from the ground. It slowly penetrated and spread to every place in the thick fog, to the ears of everyone in the long line. Is there any sound? At this time, Yukiko suddenly turned around and looked at Ren Xiling and Riko. She was sensitive to abnormal sounds because she was originally a female soldier trained in the Song family's village. Perhaps she was not just sensitive to sounds, but also sensitive to the arrival of danger. What is a sound? Ren Xiling listened in confusion. Except for the sound of footsteps and people's whispers, she didn't hear anything else. Maybe I misheard. Yukiko nodded and felt that her head was a little heavy. She began to be unable to focus her eyes. Unexpectedly, Ren Xiling suddenly screamed at this time. It turned out that Riko suddenly attacked her from behind and put her hands into Ren Xiling's neck. In this cold weather, Ren Xiling's frozen hands reached for her neck and she immediately let out a scream. Lizzie, do you want to die? Unexpectedly, Riko giggled at this time, as if she was not satisfied with Ren Xiling. She directly turned to Yukiko and put her cold hand into Yukiko's clothes. Yukiko, you are actually hidden giant beep. A bone-piercing cold made Akiko shiver, but at the same time, she woke up in an instant, and the dizziness disappeared in an instant. Sorry, it's too cold. Lizzie apologetically begged the two of them. A ball of white fur quietly blended into the thick fog and quickly moved to the front of the group. 3 steps in 2, followed by a few quick leaps, the man from the administrative bureau leaped out of the thick fog in an instant and arrived in front of a mountain village. At this time, the mountain village had been razed to the ground, just like he was in the eye of the wind, in the thick fog. There were several streams of people coming out of the thick fog in an endless stream, and then gathered in front of the ruins of the mountain village. The man from the administrative bureau looked serious, rushing to the center of the ruins of the mountain village, in front of a glowing red sinkhole. "How is it?" When the man arrived, there were already 7 black-clothed men wearing bronze masks around the sinkhole. Seeing the man coming, one of the black-clothed men said seriously, "The capacity of the life soul pearl is about 70%. Bring the rest of the people here, and we can almost refine it successfully." The man nodded, walking to the edge of the sinkhole, looking down and muttering to himself, "Million life soul pearl. I hope we can refine it in time." "Sure." The black-clothed man patted his shoulder, but suddenly he said in a deep voice, "Did you come back by yourself? What's wrong?" The man from the administrative bureau frowned. At this time, the black-clothed man clapped his palm in the air, and a heavy palm force came out. Not far away, the ground was directly blasted by the black-clothed man's palm force, and a white fluffy ball rushed out in a panic. The black-clothed man snorted and waved his arm again. A green arc shot out, directly splitting the white fluffy ball into 2. "You're being followed." The black-clothed man looked at the man from the administrative bureau. The man's face changed slightly, and he instantly turned back. Seeing this, the black-clothed man waved his hand, and suddenly 2 more black-clothed men followed. While they were fooling around, Lizzie's face changed slightly. "What's wrong?" Seeing Lizzie's face, Renziling couldn't help but ask curiously. "No. I'm just a little hungry." Lizzie stuck out her tongue. Auntie Ren habitually rolled her eyes. "Let me look for it. When I came out, I thought I brought a few pieces of chocolate. I don't know how long it will take to rest. You eat some first." Then, Auntie Ren began to rummage through her backpack. But at this time, Lizzie suddenly shot out 2 thin ice needles from her palm, one shot to the back of Renziling's neck, and the other shot to the back of Yukiko's neck. Both of them fell down instantly. Lizzie rushed forward to support them and whispered, "I'm sorry, just treat it as a weight loss acupuncture, okay? We can't go on the road ahead. Although I don't know what happened, it's obviously a dead end." Taking a deep breath, Lizzie carried both of them and quickly retreated. With her ability, it was obviously not a problem for her to protect herself. She could barely carry Renziling and Yukiko with her. As for the rest, she couldn't help even if she wanted to. But just as Lizzie retreated for a few minutes, a loud noise came from behind her. So fast. In the thick fog, the loud sound was obviously the sound of a bullet. At the same time, a flame instantly exploded beside Lizzie. Lizzie waved her hand and set up an ice shield in front of her. The ice and fire melted in an instant. Lizzie looked at the world of thick fog nervously. She saw a figure slowly walking out of the fog. The man held a pistol in his hand and pointed at the 3 of them. "I didn't expect that there was a monster hiding among the ordinary people. You hid well. I was almost fooled by you." "That's all I can do." Lizzie was not in a hurry. She smiled playfully and said, "Uncle, I don't kill and I don't do evil. I'm a law-abiding citizen. What about you? I haven't seen what you want to do. These 2 are my friends, I just want to take them away. Is that okay?" "It's not up to you." The man snorted and pulled the trigger again. Lizzie had never seen such a shot from a pistol. In a panic, she set up 3 ice shields one after another to block the bullet. But before Lizzie could react, there were 2 air-piercing sounds behind her. Lizzie was shocked. She gritted her teeth, and a fierce wind and snow whirled around her. The wind and snow whirlwind was 10 meters high, and it forced the sneak attacker to step back. After a short while, the wind and snow whirlwind dissipated. At this moment, Lizzie was wearing a white kimono with a blue belt tied like a butterfly on her back. "So it's a snow demon. It doesn't look like a native of the divine land. Humph, a foreign little demon, how dare you ruin my plan?" The attacker snorted coldly. He waved his hands, and 2 balls of flames appeared in his palms. On the other side, the man with a gun and another man in black were approaching them. Seeing this, Lizzie's eyes narrowed. She hugged Ren Xiling tightly and pulled Yukiko away. Yukiko, who was in a coma, was wrapped in a cold air and was thrown toward one of the men in black. At the moment when Yukiko was thrown out, a gust of wind and snow suddenly appeared around Lizzie. In the wind and snow, Lizzie disappeared with Ren Xiling. The man in black waved his hand and slapped Yukiko away. Yukiko hit a nearby rock hard. Suddenly, the rock shattered and Yukiko's life was unknown. Chase. Our plan can't be wrong. The man in black scolded angrily. The three of them instantly sneaked into the thick fog. At this time, Yukiko, who was under the rubble, suddenly emitted a cold air. After that, a white ball of fur rushed out from under her body and carried her body away quickly. The wind and snow gathered. Lizzie heaved a sigh of relief. She saw that the surrounding was white and she couldn't distinguish the road. She lowered her head to look at Ren Xiling and saw that her lips were a little pale. Ordinary people will definitely freeze to death. Sister Ren, your body is really good. Lizzie's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise, and then she looked back. Yukiko, I'm sorry. After all, we don't know your origin. Whether you live or die, we can only leave it to fate, leave it to fate. You will definitely die. Cold voices came from all directions like demons, which made Lizzie's face change dramatically. Those guys, they actually caught up with us in an instant? The billowing heat waves rose at this moment, evaporating the surrounding thick fog and revealing a large open space. Unknowingly, it turned out to be a cliff in front of them. Above the sky, a black-clothed man with raging flames all over his body looked down. Lizzie waved her hand and shot out a cold air, but it was evaporated in an instant before it got close to the man. A mere snow demon dares to be presumptuous in front of the Vermilion Bird clan. The man in black snorted coldly. Vermilion Bird! Lizzie shouted in horror. The one in front of her was exuding a pure aura of a big demon. She just came out for a stroll, but why did she encounter such a horrible guy? The man in black didn't care. At this moment, he opened his hands and hundreds of fire feathers condensed in the air and shot down crazily. In the thick fog, the man from the administration said, Chu Lao, keep her alive and refine her soul. This snow demon's spirit is good. The woman's spiritual aura is full and bright. She is of high quality and can be used to refine the life soul bead. It will definitely be more effective. I have my own points. The man in black. Chu Lao shouted coldly. At this moment, a large number of flaming feathers were exploding around Lizzie. Each of them contained a boundless amount of flame energy. She felt as if she was a popsicle exposed to the afternoon sun, and her body was about to melt. Lizzie gritted her teeth, but she didn't expect Chu Lao's fire feathers to be so terrifying. Suddenly, bang! The powerful fire feathers broke through Lizzie's wind and snow. The huge force of the explosion instantly blasted Ren Xiling away from Lizzie. Lizzie couldn't hold on tightly, and could only watch Ren Xiling fall down the cliff. Sister Ren! Lizzie screamed and desperately jumped towards the cliff. Unexpectedly, Old Man Chu, who was in the air, shouted coldly. 2 fire whips shot out from his sleeves and wrapped around Lizzie's body. The blazing flame power immediately made Lizzie scream in pain. Lizzie was in so much pain that she couldn't get up at once. The man from the administration saw this and couldn't help shaking his head. I told you not to hit so hard. Go down and see if that woman is dead. If she is not dead, bring her back. Don't waste it. The other man in black directly jumped into the cliff at this time. The man from the administration side lit a cigarette with a lighter and walked to Chu Lao. Chu Lao's fire whips had already wrapped around Lizzie. The flame power kept eroding her as a snow demon. Lizzie, who was in pain, didn't make a sound, but just looked in the direction of the cliff absent-mindedly. However, the fire whips that wrapped around her cooled down little by little. They froze and condensed into frost. Instantly, the frost spread all the way to Chu Lao's hands. Chu Lao was slightly startled and loosened his hands. The fire whips fell to the ground and broke into ice shards. It's not easy to find a place where I can stop for a while. Why? Lizzie struggled slightly and the fire whips that had been frozen on her body shattered instantly. Her hair had turned snow-white, spread out. Her eyes also became demonic and pale. In an instant, heavy snow flew. The wind and snow rolled up and dispersed the thick fog around. Then, it became a pure white world. The cold air spread rapidly. The man from the administration was shocked and subconsciously pulled the trigger. However, the moment the bullet broke out of the barrel, it was frozen and fell directly from the air. He didn't have time to panic and his body had directly turned into ice crystals. Chu Lao was shocked. At this moment, his demon power was crazily expanding. However, the snow demon in front of him looked at him with a ferocious smile, like a demoness. The cliff was not deep. Therefore, not long after the man in black jumped down, he had already found the woman. However, what made him feel inconceivable was that the speed of the woman's fall was a little too slow. It was as light as a feather. Just before it was about to hit the ground, it slowly descended and finally landed softly on the ground. On the ground, lush green grass grew crazily and made a bed for the woman to lie comfortably. The man in black frowned secretly and quickly walked to the front of the woman. However, he felt that something was wrong. It could even be said that it was strange. A feeling of fear and trepidation caused his aura to suddenly become chaotic. He didn't know how many years he hadn't had such a feeling of fear since he reached the limit of his potential. This woman, finally, he walked to the front of Renziling and planned to take her away. He took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed the feeling of panic in his heart. At this moment, a lazy voice suddenly came from the thick fog. "I say, this old man, I advise you to stop." The man in black had already made up his mind and turned around abruptly. Just as he turned around, a gust of wind blew from the surroundings and dispersed some of the fog. He saw a young man with a long scarf leaning against the cliff at this moment. The man in black narrowed his eyes and quietly stretched his hand to his back. The young man with the scarf raised his eyebrows and said again, "Brother, didn't I tell you not to touch her? Do you have ADHD? Who are you?" The man in black asked in a low voice. This young man's breath was hidden and he approached him silently without being noticed. If this person suddenly attacked him, he might not be able to resist. However, this person seemed to come for this woman. The man in black quickly calculated something in his mind, and the hand hidden behind his back slightly brightened. The young man suddenly heaved a sigh of relief. "Brother, I'm already being very polite. Can you please behave yourself? Can't you see that she has some kind of protective power? If you touch her, no one will be able to save you." "Is that so?" The man in black sneered. The young man sighed again and said, "Before she wakes up and notices anything, you should leave quickly. Otherwise, if you provoke someone you shouldn't provoke, even I don't dare to think about the consequences. Although I suddenly appeared and asked you to leave, you must be very unhappy. If it were me, I would also be unhappy. Who is this acting cool? But I can't help it. Look at my sincere eyes and trust me this time. It seems to be very serious." The man in black still sneered. "I want to see how serious it is." He suddenly turned around and stretched out his hand to grab. But at this moment, a silver light broke through in front of him, from the top of his head to the bottom of his body. His bronze mask suddenly split into two halves, revealing an old face. He moved his lips and his body split into two halves at this moment, falling to the left and the right. "I told you not to move, but you didn't listen to me. My eyes weren't sincere enough." The young man waved the ancient sword in his hand, and the blood quickly shook off from the blade without staining it. "How serious is it?" The young man looked at Renziling, who was sleeping soundly on the grass mat, and muttered, "Probably, it's not enough to bury her with this world." He couldn't help but fall into contemplation. "But Taisetsu, help me do something. This is the job of number 18, but she's not here now. Is that okay? No problem. Help me take care of Miss Ren. She's here. This seems to be the boss's. But she shouldn't need anyone to protect her, right? With the boss's ability, who can touch her? Because of this, you need to go there, in order to not make the master angry. Very, very scary? Taisetsu, with the strength of this world, how much anger do you think it can bear when the master is angry? I'm afraid that even the master himself doesn't know. This can't be right. Chapter 11:21. The wind rolled up the cold air on the ground. On the cliff, the white hair that hung on the ice slowly dragged. Li Zi expressionlessly came to the front of Chu Lao. At this moment, Chu Lao's body was covered with a layer of frost. Li Zi stretched out her finger and pointed at Chu Lao's body with her sharp nails. The ice sculpture in front of her was shattered into pieces in an instant and disappeared with the wind. After that, Li Zi's face gradually showed a painful expression. A trace of blood came out from the corner of her mouth. She suddenly hugged her body and fell to the ground. After some painful groans, her white hair shrank back little by little. She gradually returned to her original appearance. Li Zi staggered up and came to the edge of the cliff. Looking down, she could only see the thick fog below. She couldn't see clearly at all. She remembered that there was another man in black who also jumped down the cliff, but he hadn't come up yet. Li Zi hesitated for a moment and finally chose to jump down. Her body passed through the thick fog at a very fast speed. When she was about to reach the ground, Li Zi was suddenly stunned. Not for anything else, but because she saw Ren Xiling. At this time, Ren Xiling's body was hanging on the branch of a big tree. After Li Zi fell to the ground, she immediately jumped up and carried Ren Xiling down the tree. Except for her clothes, which were scratched in several places, Li Zi found that Ren Xiling didn't have any bruises on her body. Her breathing was still calm. Li Zi opened her mouth and looked up at the ancient trees above her head. Ah, the law of not dying from falling off the cliff is true. Although it was a little unbelievable, there was nothing more to be happy about than that she could be safe. But Li Zi didn't find any trace of the man in black who jumped down after her. This really made her puzzled. Anyway, it seemed to be good to survive. This battle almost consumed Li Zi's monster power. She didn't think more about the follow-up. She directly carried Ren Xiling on her back and groped to leave this place. The snow elves who carried Yukiko were not far from her position. Li Zi didn't feel the uneasiness of the snow elves, so Yukiko should be safe. After Li Zi left, a dark mist slowly emerged from under the tree and quietly drifted away. At this moment, the two men in black arrived at the cliff. They had followed the signal left behind by the man from the administration and Chu Lao. But when they arrived at the cliff, they only saw a frozen corpse. The only one left was the man from the administration. It was obvious that his life force had been cut off. "What the hell is going on here?" a black-clothed man said doubtfully, then touched the ground. He wanted to grab some ice, but he found that he couldn't break the ice on the ground. Just now, there was an extremely strong burst of demonic energy, but it was only for an instant. Another black-clothed man frowned and said, "This matter is strange, we need to inform His Honor immediately." But right at this moment, a loud sound suddenly came from the thick fog. Along with it, there was a slight tremor on the ground. It came from the place where the birthing soul pearl was refined. "Something's wrong. Hurry back." This might be a big scene that Bu Bu Gao could never imagine. On the ground, tens of thousands of old people walked toward the deep pit step by step as if they were possessed. Bu Bu Gao didn't know what was in the deep pit, but it was obvious that these people had lost their lives the moment they jumped in. He and Wang, who chased all the way. The traces left by tens of thousands of people walking in the stadium could be traced even by a layman, not to mention that he had passed the training and was officially appointed as a new agent of the administration. People were dying at the speed of dozens of people in a few seconds, which didn't leave any time for Bu Bu Gao to hesitate and think. Oh, I didn't expect to encounter such a big scene on my first trip. I'm really a man chosen by fate. Boo-Boo-Gao screamed and rushed out in an instant. Who are you? How dare you kill people here? Get out! Wang Hu opened his mouth, but he didn't have time to stop Boo-Boo-Gao from rushing out. Demon, come out! While holding the pistol in his hand, Boo-Boo-Gao pulled the trigger a few times, and the loud gunshots spread far and wide on the ground. At this time, several figures rushed out from all directions and appeared in front of Boo-Boo-Gao in an instant. Black clothes, bronze masks, everyone had a huge murderous aura. Boo-Boo-Gao quickly pointed his gun at several people in black, and at the same time, his hand trembled a little as he took out his ID from his clothes. Don't move! Administration! Don't move! Don't move! Kid, your ID is upside down. One of the people in black said coldly. I know! I'm just testing you, whether you recognize it or not. Boo-Boo-Gao quickly turned the ID over. Don't move! Don't move! No matter who you are, what you want to do, stop now. The person in black who spoke first suddenly turned his head and said indifferently, You won, are all the people in your bureau so flustered now? Newcomers. A man in a black suit with a bell in his hand slowly walked out of the crowd. During this time, many important people in the government are on state visits, and a lot of people have been transferred. Every place in the country needs people to stay. As for the disaster area, it's not small, and there are not enough people. Isn't it normal to catch new people to go to the battlefield? Is it? Then I'll leave it to you. The man in black nodded. Then, he waved his hand, and several men in black escaped again. They all went to the edge of the sinkhole. To them, the flustered newcomer of the administration in front of them was really not a threat. Now was the critical moment of refining, and they were not in the mood to pay attention to him. Several people in black escaped, and Boo-Boo-Gao had no time to react. Now, only the man named Yuan was left. Wearing the same clothes as himself, and looking like a man in his 30s, Boo-Boo-Gao was a little confused. What's your name? When did you graduate? Which school did you graduate from? And what's your number? The man. Yuan smiled and walked slowly to Boo-Boo-Gao. Don't move. You're with them? Boo-Boo-Gao pointed the gun at him, and found it difficult to maintain stability. Yuan pressed his hands slowly and said softly, Relax, I won't do anything to you. After all, taking care of the newcomers is the responsibility of the seniors. He continued to walk toward Boo-Boo-Gao. However, he had only taken a few steps when a bullet was fired at his feet. Boo-Boo-Gao chose to shoot at this moment. I said don't move. Can't you hear me? Boo-Boo-Gao was sweating and looked around. But Yuan in front of him disappeared in a flash, which made Boo-Boo-Gao shocked. Before he could react, a sharp pain came from his abdomen, and he bent down instantly. That's why I said relax. Boo-Boo-Gao was in pain. Not only that, his gun was quickly taken away by Yuan, and then it was simply dismantled by Yuan, and the parts were scattered on the ground. Yuan stepped on Boo-Boo-Gao's shoulder and said indifferently, You're very brave. The administration needs new blood like you, but you came at the wrong time. What do you want to do? While speaking, a sweet blood spurted out from his throat. Boo-Boo-Gao didn't expect this guy's punch to hurt him so badly. You can't do anything even if you know. It's better not to know. Yuan directly grabbed Boo-Boo-Gao's hair and dragged him to the edge of the sinkhole. Unexpectedly, Boo-Boo-Gao gritted his teeth and took out a metal rod from behind his waist. He waved it hard, and the metal rod instantly elongated. He held the metal rod and waved it at Yuan. This wave made Yuan let go of his hand. Boo-Boo-Gao quickly used his palm to support his body and jumped back to open the distance between him and Yuan. Demon subduing whip? Yuan sneered, and then his body instantly swelled up. The strong body directly broke his clothes, revealing his terrifying muscles. Patches of yellow hair began to grow crazily on Yuan's body. His head gradually became not like a human's, and his hands turned into huge claws. In front of him was a huge black tiger. The black demon tiger twisted its neck at this time. It's more comfortable like this. Working in the agency, wearing human skin every day, my bones are falling apart. You're a tiger demon? Yuan opened his eyes wide. He knew that there were some non-humans among the agents working in the agency. But usually, these non-humans were senior agents, on duty in some places with high danger index all over the country. Is it strange? Yuan sneered, kid. I said that the old people take care of the newcomers. Let me take good care of you. Bubugao's whole body was cold, and his eyes quickly turned. The tiger demon in front of him was from the agency, and a bad news immediately sounded in Bubugao's heart. In the agency was there someone like Yuan? In the end, what was behind it that had infiltrated the agency? However, before Bubugao had time to think, the tiger demon Yuan had launched an attack. In front of the demonized Yuan, as an ordinary person, Bubugao's fighting skills were useless. The pistol that could shoot Taoist bullets was dismantled by Yuan early on. You're really a newcomer. It seems that you're not even those sent to the various Taoist sects and monster clans to train. The tiger demon Yuan sneered. You're a pure newcomer promoted by the agency, right? First time on duty? Then you really hit the jackpot, encountering such a thing for the first time. The tiger demon's fist easily hit Bubugao's shoulder again. This fist made Bubugao's shoulder bones seem to have cracked. Bubugao collapsed to the ground like a pile of mud. I won't waste time with you, you go down too. The tiger demon quickly grabbed Bubugao again, wanting to throw him into the crater. Bubugao, who collapsed on the ground, suddenly straightened his belt and took out something, throwing it out with a scream. It was a longan-sized bead. The tiger demon Yuan saw the bead, and his face slightly changed, but it was too late to dodge. Boom! There was a loud noise, followed by a violent explosion. The explosion blasted a deep crater a few meters wide in the ground, and the billowing smoke and dust even spread to the edge of the crater. Bubugao vomited blood, and blood flowed out of his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. The sound wave of the explosion shook his face and made him bleed. Kid, you've got guts! In the billowing smoke, a tiger roar sounded. In an instant, the black tiger demon charged out. Its arms were lacerated, and its expression was ferocious and frightening. Damn it! This explosion didn't kill me. The people from the weapon department tricked me? Seeing Yuan rushing over, Bubugao closed his eyes in despair. However, at this moment, an even more resounding and domineering roar sounded from behind him. Bubugao subconsciously opened his eyes. He couldn't see what had happened before, he only saw this moment, this instant. The tiger demon in front of him, who couldn't even be killed by the special thunderbolt fire, had his entire chest collapsed at this moment, and he took dozens of steps back before he could barely stop. Beside Bubugao, Wang, who maintained his side kick and slowly retracted his leg. Damn it! This big idiot is so fierce! Bubugao's eyes widened, and he looked at the guy who was temporarily dragged here on the road in disbelief. Damn it! Wang Hu, I'll be your fan from today onwards. At this time, the black tiger demon Yuan, who finally stopped, took a deep breath, but he couldn't withstand the terrifying power that had invaded his body, and he vomited another mouthful of blood. He opened his eyes in horror as if he couldn't believe it. Why are you here? Emperor Yuan didn't finish his words, and he fell to the ground. At this time, at the edge of the crater, the remaining few men in black had found something wrong, and they all stopped refining the soul birth pearl. When they arrived and saw Wang Hu at the same time, they were all secretly shocked. Why would the overlord of the demon realm appear at this crucial place? Old Wang, I didn't expect you to be so fierce. Bubugao hugged Wang Hu's thigh at this time, grabbed his trousers and climbed up. When I go back, I'll definitely apply for a medal for you. Wang Hu frowned at this time, shook his head and said, I killed it? I don't know what's going on, but after this guy screamed, I felt like killing it. Wang Hu shook his head. No one seemed to understand this feeling, even if he said it out loud. He looked at the men in black in front of him, frowned and said, No matter what you guys are doing, just listen to him and stop what you're doing. This is not good." "Not good?" The men in black seem to have heard the biggest joke in the world. "For you, human life is lowly, and you actually sympathize with these people? Is there a problem?" Wang Hu said suddenly, "Lizzie told me not to mess around." Chapter 11:22. Lizzie said so. Looking at Wang Hu's self-righteous appearance, several black-robed men subconsciously searched their memories over the years. Lizzie, who was she? This was a name that hung in the mouth of the White Tiger young master, Huang Baifu, so she was definitely not a nobody. However, no matter how they searched, they still could not find any information about Lizzie in their memories over the years. This White Tiger young master seems to be a little strange. The black-robed men began to whisper among themselves. Could it be that he has reached an agreement with the authority, and now he's on the authority's side? After all, Wang Hu had personally rescued Bubugao and kicked the Black Tiger demon, Yuan, to death only recently, and after that, Wang Hu had shouted for everyone to stop. The more they thought about it, the more they felt that this was very likely. "Do it!" one of the black-robed men shouted at this time. After that, he immediately leaped forward and attacked Wang Hu with his power. At the same time, two of them quickly retreated and returned to the edge of the sinkhole again. Then, they entered the sinkhole one by one with the spells used for refining. At this time, seeing a black-robed man madly attacking him, Wang Hu instinctively raised his arm to block. The black-robed man's attack was very powerful. After blocking this attack, Wang Hu's legs directly sank into the ground. Wang Hu roared violently and swung his arm. There was no move or technique, and even his demon power was not very effective. It was purely brute force. However, it was this brute force that made the black-robed man's body feel as if he had hit a train. This sweeping arm directly swept him upside down. The black-robed man flipped in the air and landed on the ground. His palm scratched the ground, creating a claw mark of more than 10 meters before he came to a stop. As expected of the strongest white tiger. Just brute force alone is already so powerful. The black-robed man slowly stood up. Then, how about this move? The black-robed man quickly stood in front of him and formed a seal with both hands. The air behind him was distorted. After that, two golden-armored warriors shining with golden light appeared directly behind him. The two golden-armored generals were both 5 meters tall. They each held a treasure sword and a golden truncheon in their hands. They looked dignified and had extraordinary auras. Holy **T. Why do these two look like door gods? Bubugao exclaimed, "This is Mao Mountain's spirit summoning technique? Are you from Mao Mountain?" The black-robed man didn't say anything. He just made another seal with both hands. The two huge golden-armored warriors roared and swung their swords and golden truncheons at Wang Hu. Wang Hu was also ferocious. His thick arms were like metal and stone, and he used his body to crash into the sword of one of the golden-armored generals. Not only did the treasured sword fail to cut through Wang Hu's skin, but the blade even flipped when it struck Wang Hu's arm. At the same time, the golden-armored general swung the golden truncheon viciously at Wang Hu's head. Unexpectedly, Wang Hu crashed into the golden truncheon head-on and knocked the golden truncheon out of the hands of the golden-armored general. Wang Hu moved his arm and flipped his palm. At this moment, he directly grabbed the treasured sword in the hands of the golden-armored general and threw the golden-armored general out. Seeing this, the black-robed man was shocked. He didn't know why the White Tiger young master lost an arm, but his combat power was still amazing. What made him feel even more desperate was that the White Tiger young master was still fighting purely with his physical body. He didn't release any demonic power at all. Among the 4 spirits of heaven, the title of the strongest white tiger of the current generation was indeed not undeserved. "Old Wang! Save them first!" At this moment, Bubugao screamed. The black-robed man here was just holding Wang Hu back. The remaining few over there were constantly sending living people into the crater to continue refining soul bead. Okay. At this time, Wang Hu also did not hesitate. He directly jumped up and slapped the two huge golden-armored warriors to the ground, and they could not even get up. These two golden-armored generals were spirits invited by this Maoshan disciple. They were closely connected to his qi, blood, and spirit. At this moment, the two golden-armored generals were broken. The black-robed man naturally didn't feel good. He spat out a mouthful of blood and almost broke his cultivation technique. Attack together. Beside the crater, several black-robed men with bronze masks gritted their teeth and attacked together. Among them, there were Taoists who were nearing the end of their lifespans and demons whose qi and blood were beginning to decline. Although they were no longer as strong as they were in the past, each of them was once a powerhouse who reigned supreme. Although it couldn't be said that they were old but vigorous, they were definitely not weak in today's world. Feeling the turbulent power of these black-robed men, the demonic power in Wang Hu's body seemed to be drawn. Wang Hu's eyes turned golden in an instant. He took a deep breath and opened his mouth. A loud roar came out of his mouth. At the same time, a strong shock wave came out of Wang Hu's mouth. Roar! The shock wave rushed up to the sky and instantly broke through the thick fog here and went straight to the sky, and these black-robed men, after the shock wave subsided, fell to the ground like mud. Their bodies even emitted billowing steam. At this time, Bu Gao only felt like his brain was being hammered by a hammer. It was so painful that it almost split open. This was only caused by Wang Hu's roar. Bu Gao didn't know how terrifying the power of the shockwave was. He only knew that these mysterious men in black, who were doing extremely evil things, were all defeated by this attack. At this time, Bu Gao limped in front of these black-robed men and took off the masks on their faces. After a while, Bu Gao suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. This is the great king of Qingshan. 10 years ago, he massacred more than a dozen villages and disappeared without a trace. This is a Chuanjian demon Taoist. He once used living people to refine magic weapons and has at least hundreds of lives on his hands. And this one too. All of them. When he recognized the true faces of these black-robed men, Bu Gao suddenly felt a chill down his spine. These are all notorious felons on the administration's wanted list. These guys gathered together, what are they doing? Bu Gao cautiously approached the edge of the sinkhole. He saw that at the bottom of the sinkhole, the crimson spiritual energy was rolling non-stop like a flame. And in the middle of it, an even brighter red bead was slowly rotating. Just for this thing? Bu Gao took a deep breath. He looked back at the people around him who had lost their souls. There were at least 70 to 80,000 people here. But, before he came, how many people had jumped into the crater and become materials for the terrifying bead? Are you okay? Wang Hu walked behind Bu Gao and waved his hand to pat him on the shoulder. This made Bu Gao jump in fright. His face turned pale. He originally wanted to shout at Lao Wang, but when he remembered Lao Wang's terrifying roar, he immediately stopped and shook his head. No, I won't die. Wang Hu nodded and then asked, then? What are we going to do? Bu Gao looked at Wang Hu and then looked at the bead in the crater. But at this moment, Wang Hu suddenly frowned and looked back. He saw that in the thick fog, 2 black shadows suddenly shot out. It turned out that these 2 people were going to support Chu Lao. After discovering that Chu Lao and the other 2 had died, they hurried back. There's more. Bu Gao exclaimed at this time. Wang Hu clenched his fist, but soon loosened it. He didn't know why. As long as he clenched his fist, he felt weak all over. Wang Hu shook his head. It was better to use his palm. However, these 2 black-robed men didn't say a word. They came aggressively, but they didn't attack Wang Hu. Instead, when Wang Hu and Bu Gao were stunned, they directly jumped into the crater. They jumped down and seemed to be shouting something. When their figures disappeared in the hot red spiritual energy, a huge red light suddenly shot out from the crater. At the same time, the red bead in the crater slowly climbed up along with the red light. In the surprised eyes of Wang Hu and Bu Bugao, a palm suddenly appeared as if it tore through space and took the bead in its hand. Wang Hu's eyes flashed with a trace of light, and he rushed to the sky. But at the moment when he was about to touch the mysterious palm, everything suddenly disappeared. Wang Hu rushed out of the red light and didn't touch anything. In the end, he could only fall down and look at all this in confusion. The hot red spiritual energy in the crater gradually dissipated, and finally, it became an ordinary crater that couldn't be more ordinary. Bu Bugao, who was still in shock, looked at the people for a while, and then asked carefully, "Old Wang, are you okay?" "Gone." Wang, who was still looking at the place where the palm disappeared. Bu Bugao sighed. He saw that the people who had lost their souls had fallen to the ground at this time. Bu Bugao hurriedly went forward to check and found that these people had just fainted. He was relieved. Wang Hu walked over and said calmly, "They should be fine." "I feel that." "You're not a doctor, how do you know?" Bu Bugao asked curiously. "I just feel it, but I can't say it." Wang Hu shook his head. "Right, what should I do next?" "Who knows?" This was not something that a newcomer like him could handle at all. This time, if it weren't for the fierce old Wang, he would have become the dregs in the crater, or maybe not even a dregs. However, this old Wang was really fierce. Bu Bugao thought quickly and suddenly asked, "Old Wang, let's not talk about what I'm going to do. What are you going to do?" Wang Hu lowered his head and pondered for a while, and then slowly said, "Lizzie said that I have to abide by the law. Well, I'll listen to you and abide by the law." "So, who on earth is Lizzie?" "That's good," Bu Bugao said seriously. "Old Wang, I'm now officially promoting you to a non-permanent member during wartime. Don't worry, each of us has the right to appoint our own partner as a logistician. I haven't chosen my partner yet, so you can team up with me first." Wang Hu nodded. Bu Bugao said, "Do your best. With your ability, you'll definitely be able to reach a very high position very quickly. Maybe it's even possible to aim for National Scholar." "National Scholar?" Wang Hu frowned. Bu Bugao nodded and said, "The highest honor in our administration not only requires extraordinary strength, but also unparalleled loyalty. National Scholars are responsible for the safety of the real big shots in our country. If it weren't for the fact that the big shots are on a state visit and a few National Scholars are protecting them, it would be a matter of minutes to catch these wanted criminals. However, I heard that the #1 National Scholar has been sent out to investigate this thick fog incident. I don't know where he is now." "#1 National Scholar?" Wang Hu was quite curious. Bu Bugao said proudly, "That's right. The one known as Fire Cloud Evil God. Legend has it that he's the strongest human. Anyway, do your best. My goal is to become the man of the section chief. And your goal is to become a National Scholar. Let's debut together." "Oh." And so, they returned to the problem of how to deal with the tens of thousands of people who were unconscious. Fortunately, there were many police officers and even soldiers from the military who came to rescue them. There was even a major named Lung Feng among them. After Lung Feng was rescued by Bu Bugao, the two men explained the situation to each other and finally understood the current situation, but Lung Feng discovered something that made his heart burn with anxiety. Ren Xiling was missing. When he heard Bu Bugao say that before he arrived, many people had been pushed into the deep pit and used as materials for some evil creature, Lung Feng's face turned even paler. "Brother Luo, Dumbo let you down." He walked to the deep pit, his eyes glistening with tears. "Major Lung." Ling Feng took a deep breath and turned around. When he saw Bu Bugao walking towards him, he said in a low voice, "I'm fine. Protecting the people is more important, let's hurry up and pack up. Mr. Bu, can you show us the way out?" "No problem." Bubugao nodded. His original job was to enter areas with thick fog and assist in rescuing and evacuating the people. He was a little worried when he was alone since it was his first time on duty, but now that he had encountered Wang Hu, Bubugao was not afraid at all. This was a sure win. Inside the karst cave, on the towering altar, Lai Kaixing slowly pulled his arm out of the pillar on the altar. After he pulled it out, a bright red orb slowly rotated in his palm. At that moment, an old voice spoke from behind him. The quality of this divine spirit orb is not at its best. Lai Kaixing turned around, and behind him was a man wearing a bronze mask. This was the real Tianxin 71. There's a problem, Lai Kaixing said unhurriedly. Not long ago, Pit 19 encountered Shinryu. What is it this time? The man with the bronze mask, Tianxin 71 asked in a low voice. It seems to be the White Tiger young master, Huang Baifu. It's him. Tianxin 71 lowered his head and pondered for a moment before saying, We don't know what happened in the Penglai treasure vault. But since Huang Baifu appeared, I'm afraid Bai Jie and the others may have returned. And there's the fire cloud evil god from the administration. The situation is very unfavorable for us. Lai Kaixing said indifferently, It's okay. Although these two divine spirit orbs are not perfect, we have enough materials to refine 1,000,000 divine spirit orb. He waved his hand, and bright red pearls appeared out of thin air on the altar. Each of these life-soul pearls contained tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of living souls. He said he was going to refine 1,000,000 divine spirit orb, but it was not really 1,000,000, maybe 2 or 3 million. At this moment. Chapter 11:23. This was the last place in the valley where the soul birth orbs were being refined. A young man stood on the slope with his hands behind his back. He was looking at the densely packed heads below. His eyes were indifferent, and his mind didn't seem to be on the progress of the refinement below. Soon, another young man came to the slope. Shiyu. The young man standing with his hands behind his back was Gongsun Shiyu, one of the heroes of the Qian division of the Xianyuan Palace. He had awakened a part of the Yellow Emperor's bloodline in the collateral branch of the Gongsun clan. After being defeated by the Fire Cloud evil god and forced to retreat, Gongsun Shiyu sought a place to heal his wounds. After his injuries were healed, he began to participate in the refinement of the 1,000,000 soul birth orbs. In this dense fog area, they quietly opened up a large number of such deep pits with the help of the fog. As the connection between the outside world and the fog was almost cut off, the soul-generating beads bypassed the eyes and ears of the people from the administrative bureau one after another and were quietly refined successfully. They were still trying their best to search for traces of the trapped people in the fog, but they didn't know that most of the people in this area were already dead. Shi Shui, you're back. Hearing this, Gongsun Shiyu turned around. Gongsun Shi Shui was someone who had grown up with him. They received the teachings of the clan together, practiced martial arts together, and participated in the inheritance of war souls together. They were almost inseparable from each other since birth. This time, Gongsun Jishui's war soul was accidentally destroyed when he was trying to capture Nero. With no other choice, Gongsun Jishui could only return to the Xianyuan Palace and select a new war soul from the Martyr's Palace. There was a small problem with the inheritance of the war soul, but it's been resolved. Gongsun Shi Shui said seriously. What kind of war soul was it? Gongsun Shiyu asked slowly. Gongsun Shi Shui smiled. It was quite lucky. It was chosen by the first generation of war souls. Gongsun Shiyu opened his mouth slightly. The so-called first generation of war souls were actually the generals who had followed the Yellow Emperor to war. Their souls were preserved in a special way, and they were the most powerful war souls in the Xianyuan Palace. The direct descendants of the first generation of heroic souls were called the second generation of heroic souls, and so on until the fourth generation. Then, they agreed to be called the fifth generation of fighting souls. Gongsun Shiyu and Gongsun Jishui received the inheritance of the battle soul together. Because Gongsun Shiyu had awakened the bloodline of the Yellow Emperor, he received the first-generation battle soul the first time he came in contact with it. Moreover, it was one of the first-generation battle souls, while Gongsun Jishui only received the second-generation battle soul. I didn't expect you to profit from your misfortune. Gongsun Shiyu nodded. Gazing into the distance, she said in a low voice, First generation, you are gradually catching up, Shi Sui. At this time, Gongsun Jishui did not notice the trace of disharmony in Gongsun Shiyu's tone. Perhaps the ancestors responded to me. In the current situation, I cannot be a burden. Then, Gongsun Jishui walked to the edge of the slope and looked down at the dark mass of figures. He frowned and said, Siyu, do we really have to help Lai Kai-shing to this extent? Even though we, as martial cultivators, do not have the concept of karma and sin. But after all, your shocking Huangji scripture is to help the world, you are walking the path of man. I know what I am doing. Gongsun Shiyu shook his head. The monarch's shocking world scripture is the #1 martial art in the world for the emperor of mankind to cultivate. Since ancient times, there have only been a handful of people who have been able to cultivate it to the emperor realm, and the only one who was able to cultivate it to the highest level, the emperor realm, was the Yellow Emperor who created it. Now, I have been lingering in the emperor realm for a long time, and I still can't break through. Do you know what I lack? What is it? Dragon Chi. Gongsun Shiyu looked down at the dark mass of heads coldly again. The Dragon Chi of the Shinryu Emperor. Only by becoming the Emperor of the human world and absorbing the Dragon Chi of the Shinryu Emperor into my body can I take another step forward and enter the Emperor realm of the shocking Huangji scripture. This is what Lai Kai-shing promised you? Gongsun Jishui suddenly asked in a low voice. He promised me? Gongsun Shiyu said indifferently, the younger generation of the Qian division of the Xianyuan Palace will arrive in a few days. I will let him fulfill his lifelong wish, and then, this world will be mine. There is no such thing as who can promise who. Restoring the imperial system, building a new dynasty, breaking through the new realm of the shocking Huangji scripture as the emperor of a new dynasty, and pursuing the pinnacle of power, this was Gongsun Shiyu's ultimate goal. But the Xianyuan Palace's motto was to hide from the world, and only when Kelowna was in danger would they make a move. Gongsun Shiyu's idea was the same as breaking the thousands of years of Xianyuan Palace's motto. Not to mention whether the older generation of the Qian division would agree, the Koan division would probably jump out to stop him. Gongsun Jishui sighed. The shocking Huangji scripture is only one of the 3 great martial arts of the Xianyuan Palace. Shiyu, with your talent, if you cultivated the other 2 martial arts, you would have reached the peak already. Why do you have to do this? Because only the shocking Huangji scripture can reach the pinnacle of the scenery. Gongsun Shiyu said faintly, just like how the Shinryu of Kelowna stood at the pinnacle, or that golden-haired woman that day, that kind of pinnacle power. What kind of color is this world in their eyes? Don't tell me you don't want to know? Gongsun Jishui was silent for a moment. He decided to skip this topic. When I came here, I went to Lai Caixing's place first. From what I saw, the number of generating soul orbs seems to be enough. This last trap is dispensable. Since this one has already been refined to this point, I might as well finish it. Gongsun Shiyu said indifferently, the ones here are just fake objects. There aren't many with true souls. Besides, the Xianyuan Palace is not the underworld. Why would they care about the 6 paths of reincarnation? However, right after Gongsun Shiyu finished saying those words, a commotion suddenly sounded from below. Gongsun Shiyu was only supervising the last trap. The ones who were actually refining were the group of black-robed men with bronze masks. These people or demons were summoned by Lai Kai-shing. They had already lost hope. No matter how much they killed, it wouldn't hurt them. As the saying goes, a dead pig fears no boiling water. This was probably the case. Let's go down and take a look, Gong Sun Shiu said softly. He tiptoed lightly, like a startled swan. At the edge of the sinkhole, the clothes on the arm of a black-robed man were torn. Not only that, the bronze mask on his face was also shattered, revealing half of an old and terrifying face full of scars. And right in front of this black-robed man, there was a youth who looked to be about 13 or 14 years old, a demon. There was a wound about 10 centimeters long on this demon's shoulder. At this moment, the little boy was pressed on the ground with all 4 limbs, like a wild beast that was difficult to tame. Behind this little boy, there was another young man who looked slightly older. At this moment, the slightly older young man said indifferently, "Zhui Feng, didn't I tell you that you must press forward with indomitable will once you throw out a punch? You could have ended this bastard's life with a single punch, but because of your hesitation, he managed to keep his dog life." The little boy's ferocious face suddenly turned bitter. "Big brother, even if you say so, I really don't understand what is the realm of indomitable will. Figure it out yourself." The slightly older boy snorted softly, turned around, and stared intently at the blood-like aura rolling in the sinkhole. As for the edge of the sinkhole, there were black-robed men who were constantly casting symbols into the sinkhole as if they were indifferent to what was happening outside. Zhuifeng sighed, shrugged his head, and once again put on a look that he thought was very fierce, facing the black-robed man in front of him. Well, although it was a bit difficult to fight, it was much easier to deal with compared to Sun Shaosheng. At least, he was not the one who was beaten up. The conversation between the 2 young men, Zhuifeng and Emo Xiaofei, was heard by the black-robed man with a broken bronze mask. At this moment, he was fuming with anger. "How dare you? I'm so pissed off." Seeing that the black-robed man seemed to be desperate, his face suddenly flushed. Zhuifeng's heart suddenly thumped. Since brother Emo Xiaofei became abnormal, he really fought with whoever he met. For example, this time, after brother Emo Xiaofei saw the living people here being pushed into the sinkhole, he was furious for some reason and directly kicked him out. Then, he fought with the black-robed man for a few moves. The realm of indomitable will. Zhuifeng really didn't move. It seemed that Sun Shaosheng had said something similar when he was a coach. However, even if he didn't move, it didn't prevent Zhuifeng from fighting at this time. Although he couldn't achieve the realm of indomitable will, it was always right to go all out. In the face of the black-robed man's desperate attack, Zhuifeng stacked the greedy wolf's supernatural power on his body without saying a word. Then, he launched the fist skill that he learned from brother Emo Xiaofei. This was already Zhuifeng's strongest attack so far. The first style of Imperial Shocking Fist, Greedy Wolf's Supernatural Power Godspeed, Greedy Wolf's Supernatural Power Giant Strength, Greedy Wolf's Supernatural Power King Kong. The mighty punch had not really launched, but it had already caused waves of wind, blowing sand and stones around. Zhuifeng's momentum also soared crazily at this moment. This was not a move driven by the martial cultivation's true power, but a combination of a large amount of demonic power and the little bit of true power that Zhuifeng had cultivated during this period of time. The vigorous demonic power added a demonic aura to this world-swallowing punch. Under full concentration, Zhuifeng's essence, qi, and spirit were almost twisted into one. He still didn't know what the realm of indomitable will was. He only had a strong desire at this moment. That was to launch this punch, and knock down the opponent in front of him. Not far away, feeling the complex aura of Zhuifeng's punch, Emo Xiaofei flashed a glimmer of light in his eyes. He nodded with satisfaction. Instinct? I may have released a monster. At this moment, the black-robed man had been completely controlled by the momentum of Zhuifeng's punch. He was motionless. Finally, Zhuifeng's momentum was about to reach the peak. All the power in his body was twisted into one, and he had reached the limit. But right at this moment, a similarly majestic aura suddenly shot out. This sudden surge of majestic aura seemed to be quite similar to Zhuifeng's punch, but it was much purer. Zhou Feng's momentum, that was about to reach the peak, suddenly deflated like a balloon because of this majestic momentum. In a hurry, Zhou Feng could only barely launch this punch. Bang! Loud noise. The fist did not hit the black-robed man. What the fist hit was another fist, Gong Sun Shiyu's fist. The shock wave from the collision of the two fists instantly blew the surrounding living people to the ground. People fell down in rows like dominoes. In the end, Zhou Feng spat out a mouthful of blood. He was actually forced to retreat by Gong Sun Shiyu's fist. His body directly flew out and hit a huge rock. Seeing this, Mo Xiaofei suddenly sighed, "What a pity." Gong Sun Shiyu squinted his eyes and said coldly, "What's a pity?" Mo Xiaofei casually glanced at Gong Sun Shiyu and said indifferently, "If you were a little slower, his fist momentum would be complete and perfect. Then, the power of this punch would be fully exerted, and his punching skill would be further improved." Then, Mo Xiaofei shook his head. "But it doesn't matter. People who learn martial arts need to be indomitable. He hasn't learned martial arts for a long time. Although his talent is amazing, his foundation is not stable. This failure is not a bad thing. If he can pick it up again in the future, his fist intent will be more complete and thorough. You can be considered to have made a contribution." Gong Sun Shiyu stared at the young guy in front of him. This guy had a strange aura that didn't match his age at all. Even the true force inside Gong Sun Shiyu's body was faintly becoming obscure at this moment. This made him quite surprised. At this moment, Gong Sun Shiyu asked in a low voice, "Where did you learn this punching skill of the monster clan?" Mo Xiaofei ignored him. 2,000 years ago, he was the only one who dared to ask the world. No one in the world dared to ask him face to face. He waved his hand and pointed at the sinkhole, asking in a low voice, "You evildoers, how dare you refine such an evil thing here? What do you want?" "Young Master Gongsun, the soul-generating bead is about to be refined successfully. Don't let anyone destroy it. Please kill this man and this monster." The black-robed man with the broken mask screamed at this moment. "How dare you?" Unexpectedly, his words directly aroused the hidden viciousness of Mo Xiaofei. Mo Xiaofei opened his eyes and looked at the black-robed man, saying in a low voice, "You deserve to die." 2 simple words. With a thud, the black-robed man's knees directly hit the ground. It was so hard that the soil was overturned. But what was more shocking was that the black-robed man's head was lowered. Gong Sun Shishui hurriedly came forward to check. Instantly, he was shocked. He looked at Gong Sun Shiyu and said solemnly, "He's dead. Life and death are decided by a single word." Gong Sun Shiyu squeezed out a voice from his throat, "Who are you?" Chapter 11:24. Probably everyone would be angry when they heard such an answer, especially the arrogant ones. Gong Sun Shiyu chuckled in anger. His voice was calm and powerful. "Sir, aren't you afraid of spraining your back when you talk?" As if to prove his words, something exploded behind Mo Xiaofei at this moment. A loud explosion was heard, but no smoke or fire could be seen. It sounded like a sudden explosion in the air, and Mo Xiaofei's figure shook slightly because of it. Seeing this, Gong Sun Shishui opened his mouth in surprise. "Shiyu, when did you? It's not impossible to achieve the same thing with the mind." Gong Sun Shiyu said blandly, "When you're strong enough, you can do it." It wasn't an explanation for Gong Sun Shishui, but for Mo Xiaofei. "You've cultivated the shocking the world scripture well." Mo Xiaofei was expressionless. Gong Sun family is indeed the Yellow Emperor's descendant. You're much better than others. The Yellow Emperor is kind enough to leave you such a good descendant. Unfortunately, your descendants are not good enough. How arrogant! This time, even Gong Sun Shishui couldn't hold back his anger. For Xianyuan Palace, especially the Gongsun family of the Qian clan, the Yellow Emperor was their faith. Nobody could stand someone talking about their ancestors. Meanwhile, Gongsun Shiyu sneered. His true force rolled out of his body like smoke signals, and the white flame condensed into the shadow of a majestic general. Unexpectedly, Emo Xiaofei shook his head and said, "I promise that if I meet any descendant of the Gongsun family who made a mistake in the future, I'll show mercy. You two can leave now. Go back and think about what Yellow Emperor Xianyuan left for you. What he wants you to do, and what you shouldn't do. Also, you've cultivated the shocking the world scripture in the wrong direction. That's all I have to say." Gongsun Shiyu narrowed his eyes. He seemed to have thought of something, but he couldn't catch it. On a whim, his fighting spirit inexplicably soared. The difficult problem of the cultivation method that had troubled him for so many years had a faint feeling of loosening at this moment. For a martial artist, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Gongsun Shiyu had a feeling that as long as he fought this person and won, he wouldn't even need to become the emperor. He would be able to reach a whole new level of cultivation from another direction. A bright light flashed through his eyes, and his aura soared crazily in an instant. The strength of the soaring aura shook the blood and chi of the black-clothed men who were continuously making hand seals in the pit. They had no choice but to stop and even spit out a mouthful of blood. Perhaps it was because Gongsun Shiyu's aura was too strong at this moment. Emo Xiaofei also emitted an aura that could compete with it, and it was slightly stronger than Gongsun Shiyu's. Gongsun Shiyu had shaken everyone, but he still couldn't shake Emo Xiaofei. "You really do practice the Imperial Extreme Shocking World Sutra." Gongsun Shiyu walked forward. "Who are you? You are not from the Gongsun family. Where did you learn this from? You call yourself the emperor? I'm afraid you also want to fight for the world and deduce the cultivation method to the highest level, right? Gongsun Wua. Our family once had a traitor, and we don't know whether he is still alive or not. Did you learn this cultivation method from him?" This was almost the only possibility that Gongsun Shiyu could think of. Hearing Gongsun Shiyu's analysis, Gongsun Shishui gave a start, and then didn't dare to frown, because he also felt that this was the reason. However, this wasn't the case. Emo Xiaofei's cultivation method came from Xianyuan Palace, which was a top secret of Xianyuan Palace Gongsunhua. Emo Xiaofei thought of the Gongsun family member who tried to challenge him in the Penglai treasure house, and said disdainfully, "Just a talented trash who can't walk on the emperor's path, and can only choose the overbearing path." Gongsun Shiyu didn't care so much. At this moment, his aura had reached the peak, and just like Zhuifeng not long ago, he had reached the point where he had to fight. He made a punch. In a fight between masters, only one move was needed. This was a strike that contained all of his techniques: cultivation base, comprehension, essence, energy, spirit, and everything, a strike that pressed forward with indomitable will. Instantly, Gongsun Shiyu seemed to see the end of the cultivation method dilemma, as if he saw the hope to cross this dilemma. At this moment, under the influence of Gongsun Shiyu's punch, those who had lost their souls, the tens of thousands of people who hadn't been pushed into the giant pit, woke up one after another. But the moment they woke up, their consciousness was taken away again, and they fell to the ground. Gongsun Shishui's face turned slightly pale, and he needed to launch a new battle soul to barely resist Gongsun Shiyu's aura. But Emo Xiaofei still didn't move. He was like an insurmountable mountain, towering and motionless. "I said I'll show mercy." Emo Xiaofei snorted coldly, "But it's only one side. I've given you a chance, and now? I didn't break my promise." Break. He didn't seem to make any movements, only a single shout. But this shout was like a sharp sword that instantly cut through Gongsun Shiyu's aura that had reached the peak, like piercing a balloon that had been forcefully inflated to the limit. The leaking of the aura instantly drained the blood, spirit, and spirit in Gongsun Shiyu's body. His fist had yet to truly strike out, but everything had already disappeared like flowing water. Just like how Windchaser was only a little bit away from comprehending the state of indomitable will, He was only a little bit away from being able to break through the predicament of the cultivation method and reach a whole new realm. Puff! Blood mist spurted out of Gong Sun Shiyu's mouth. At this moment, the meridians in his body couldn't withstand the violent backlash of his true force, and one acupoint after another exploded. Shiyu! Gong Sun Shui screamed in shock. With blood in his mouth, Gong Sun Shiyu staggered and was about to fall. His hands drooped powerlessly, and he stared at Emo Xiaofei, unable to hide the horror in his eyes. Emperor Realm. But at the same time, a violent aura suddenly appeared in Gong Sun Shiyu's consciousness. At this moment, he seemed to hear a huge dragon roar. A dragon roar filled with anger, craziness, and hatred rang out. In that instant, Gong Sun Shiyu's consciousness was almost taken away by another thought that was filled with killing intent. He suddenly stretched out his drooping arm, and the earth gave up the golden ripples. A golden sword shadow slowly stretched out from the earth at this moment. That golden sword shadow finally fell into Gong Sun Shiyu's hand, and his declining aura instantly recovered to the peak, or even higher, but it was just another kind of aura. Emo Xiaofei frowned. Xianyuan? I see. No wonder you're so arrogant. Go to hell. All of a sudden, Gong Sun Shiyu clenched the golden sword shadow in her hands. Like a sharp arrow, she shot out with great power and hacked down at Emo Xiaofei with this golden sword shadow, which was the simplest move, splitting Mount Hua. A crazy murderous aura swept out. The moment Emo Xiaofei was about to be killed by the golden sword shadow, he suddenly raised his hand and made a gesture of holding the sword horizontally to block the attack. Ding! It was a sound like metal clashing. At this moment, the nearby mountains were all blasted apart by this loud sound, and they were all lowered by a lot. What a majestic momentum, what a terrifying impact! Zhuifeng had blood on the corner of his mouth. He pushed away the gravel that smashed on his body, and slowly stood up. But immediately, he looked at Emo Xiaofei in shock. That golden sword shadow was now standing in front of Emo Xiaofei. Gong Sun Shiyu still maintained the posture of chopping down with all his strength, but something blocked the golden sword shadow. It was a flash of purple lightning that had blocked the golden sword shadow. It wasn't a purple lightning, but a sword that stirred up the purple lightning. It gradually became clear in Emo Xiaofei's hand. At this moment, Emo Xiaofei waved his hand, and the sword covered with purple lightning split the golden sword shadow in an instant. Gong Sun Shiyu's face changed dramatically, and the sudden change made his murderous mind recover a little, but the inertia of being split apart made him move his legs crazily. His legs dragged on the ground for dozens of meters before he finally stopped. There's actually a weapon in the world that can block the sharpness of Xuanyuan's sword? Gong Sun Shui looked at this scene in disbelief. Although he knew that Gong Sun Shiyu could only summon a sword light of Xuanyuan's sword. But this was also the best weapon in Kelowna, the sharpest Xianyuan sword. What kind of sword is this? Gong Sun Shiyu's face had never been so solemn before. In Emo Xiaofei's sword covered with purple lightning, he even felt a power similar to Xuanyuan's. This almost overturned his understanding. This is Xianyuan's Sword of Emperor. Emo Xiaofei looked at Gong Sun Shiyu and said indifferently, Xianyuan, Sword of Emperor? Gong Sun Shiyu was stunned. How dare you use the name of Xianyuan? Impossible. Emo Xiaofei said coldly, don't you know? It seems that your Gong Sun family has also declined. Since ancient times, Xianyuan has been divided into 3 swords: God-slaying, heaven-punishing, and Sword of Emperor. 3 swords combined into one is the real Xianyuan Sword of Jiuzhou. This sword of yours is just a sword light of God-slaying, a firefly's light. How dare it compete with the bright moon? I don't believe it. Gong Sun Shiyu's anger rose again. He raised the golden sword light in his hand again, and the sky was full of golden sword shadows. Emo Xiaofei snorted coldly. The God-slaying has the world in his heart. He wants to kill the heartless god and leave a chance for the people to live. You only have selfish desires in your heart. You don't deserve it. As the owner of Xianyuan, you've really shamed me. Die. He raised the sword high and chopped it down resolutely. When the heavens were angry, the heavens were also angry. A purple thunderbolt broke through the layers of thick fog and heavily struck Gongsun Shiyu's body with supreme majesty. The golden sword light shattered instantly. Heaven and earth turned dark. The tremendous power even directly exploded the crater, killing several black-robed men in an instant, not leaving behind a single trace of ash. After a long time, when everything calmed down, the sinkhole that swallowed tens of thousands of people had disappeared, and the surroundings were flat. However, the people who fainted on the ground were not hurt at all. Only Gongsun Shiyu, whose clothes were destroyed, his meridians exploded, and his body was covered in blood. He fell to the ground, his breathing weak, and his eyes lifeless. Shiyu Gongsun Shishui was also not hurt by this terrifying blow. He looked at Mo Xiaofei, who was holding the sword of Emperor in horror, and trembled with fear. He was afraid that the other party had such precise control of power, and trembled with the power of the sword of Emperor. He had to bite the bullet and came to Gongsun Shiyu's side. Looking at Gongsun Shiyu's hopeless appearance, he fell silent for a moment. Take him away. Mo Xiaofei put down the sword of Emperor and said indifferently, I've destroyed his martial arts and cut off all his vitality. He won't live for long. For the sake of Xianyuan Palace's merit of guarding the world, I'll let him have a complete corpse. Gongsun Shishui was drenched in cold sweat, and his face was pale. Facing this mysterious young man, he couldn't even resist. Mo Xiaofei was too strong. When you go back, think about what the ancestral teachings of Xianyuan Palace are. Mo Xiaofei snorted coldly. If I find that your Gongsun family dares to harm people again, I'll take the sword of Emperor and kill my way to Xianyuan Palace, to wipe out your family. Gongsun Shishui didn't speak, but silently picked up Gongsun Shiyu. After taking a deep look at Mo Xiaofei, he rushed out of this place without a word. Gongsun Shiyu's breath was getting weaker and weaker, and was almost gone. Big brother? Zhuefeng dragged his tired body, slowly coming to Mo Xiaofei. His wounds healed quickly. After being sent flying by Gongsun Shiyu's punch, although he failed to comprehend the state of indomitable will, he accidentally activated a new ability in Greedy Wolf's inheritance, self-healing. Super self-healing ability. Mo Xiaofei waved his hand, and the sword of Emperor disappeared from his hand. He turned his head and looked at Zhuefeng. He revealed a rare smile. People who learn martial arts must remember to be fickle and impatient. One failure doesn't mean anything. Comprehend what I've taught you in your own way. Big brother? Wind-chasing wolf was stunned. He felt that this big brother Mo Xiaofei was a bit off. I'm a bit tired, I'll take a rest. Mo Xiaofei still looked calm, but there was a supreme majesty in the calmness. I'll return your big brother to you. With that, Mo Xiaofei fell down. Zhuefeng hurriedly reached out to support him, only to find that Mo Xiaofei had fainted, but his breathing was smooth, as if he was just sleeping. But in a flash, Mo Xiaofei opened his eyes again. He called weakly, Zhuefeng. This tone was already the familiar tone of Mo Xiaofei that Wind-chasing Wolf was familiar with. Wind-chasing Wolf said in surprise, Big brother? You're normal. Probably. Mo Xiaofei gave a bitter smile. Chapter 11:25. It didn't take long for Mo Xiaofei to wake up again. Zhuefeng was naturally very happy. He was almost worried to death during this period of time. Now that Mo Xiaofei had recovered, he was naturally thankful. Big brother, what happened to you? Do you remember why I came to Mount Tai? Mo Xiaofei looked at Zhuefeng. Although he was trapped in his body during this period of time, it was not that he couldn't perceive what happened in the outside world. For Mo Xiaofei, this experience was very unreal. He was like a bystander, constantly looking at his body and what that person had experienced. Mo Xiaofei was sincerely grateful to Xuefeng because during this period of time, Xuefeng still didn't leave him and even replaced him to communicate with his distant parents. Well, you said you want to find the successor of the cloth sect and find the mystery of your previous life, Xuefeng said quickly. He is my previous life, Mo Xiaofei said faintly. Xuefeng was stunned and widened his eyes. Previous life? Isn't he the ferocious ghost who occupied your body? As a demon, he still knew some common sense. The previous life was more often equivalent to another life, a memory, but Mo Xiaofei was obviously another person. It's true. Mo Xiaofei shook his head and smiled bitterly. Although I don't understand, but he is indeed my previous life. And his background is so big that I don't even dare to think about it. With that said, Mo Xiaofei slowly stood up and waved his hand. Not far away, a boulder weighing more than 1,000 kilograms flew out of the soil in an instant. Then, it gently floated above Mo Xiaofei like a bird, nimbly circling around. Mo Xiaofei whispered, "That boss, when he gave me this infinite possibility, did he already know, boss?" Mo Xiaofei had encountered it. Xuefeng had also encountered it. This was the common connection between the two. It was also a topic that he and Xuefeng discussed privately but would not casually discuss. Big brother. Xuefeng took a deep breath, patted Mo Xiaofei's shoulder, and said seriously, "Whether it's the previous life or the present life, you're my big brother, and you'll be my big brother forever. We agreed on a lifetime. A year, a month, or even an hour is not considered a lifetime." Mo Xiaofei was moved, but he seemed to have heard this sentence somewhere before. Something doesn't seem right. What's with the sudden goosebumps? Mo Xiaofei shook his head hard. The mystery of the previous life was too important for Mo Xiaofei to deal with. Not to mention that he couldn't see the successor of the linen sect. He seemed to be in some kind of danger again. How to deal with the tens of thousands of people who had fallen was a headache. Let's save them first. Mo Xiaofei took a deep breath. We can't ignore them, but there are so many people. Looking at Mo Xiaofei pinching his sleeves, Wind-Chasing Wolf smiled. No matter how difficult it was or whether he could save it or not, he would never hesitate to save it once he made up his mind. This was the big brother Mo Xiaofei he was familiar with. "Big brother, let me help you." Xuefeng caught up from behind. "Wake up the policemen and those in military uniform first," Mo Xiaofei said quickly. "Don't tell them what happened lest it causes panic. Just say that you don't know anything. Oh, call the policemen and the soldiers." "Okay." Gongsun Shishui had to stop. Gongsun Shiyu, who was on his back, was dying. Just as the mysterious and powerful youngster said, Gongsun Shiyu's vitality had been cut off. His meridians were all broken, his bones were almost broken, and his qi was full of holes. With such injuries, even if he could be saved, Gongsun Shiyu would most likely become a complete cripple. "I hate," Gongsun Shishui put down Gongsun Shiyu slowly, looking at his lifeless eyes, saying nothing. Gongsun Shiyu was still trying to say something. However, at this moment, it seemed that even moving his lips was difficult for him to ascend to the heavens. "Don't worry, I'll take you back to Xianyuan Palace." Gongsun Shishui looked very calm. He had always been calm. He had been following Gongsun Shiyu since he was a child, silently cooperating with Gongsun Shiyu. Gongsun Shiyu's eyes were wide open as he stared at Gongsun Shishui. The despair in his eyes was moving. Gongsun Shishui took a deep breath and suddenly pressed his palm on Gongsun Shiyu's chest. He said in a low voice, "Is this the end?" But at this moment, Gongsun Shishui suddenly frowned. Because an extremely violent, evil and violent aura suddenly gushed out from Gongsun Shiyu's body. It was as red as blood, but it also looked like it was mixed with ink. A red and black sticky mist slowly spread out from Gongsun Shiyu's body. It completely covered Gongsun Shiyu. Gongsun Shishui was shocked. At this moment, Gongsun Shiyu slowly stood up. His entire body was wrapped in a thick red and black fog. His mouth suddenly cracked open, all the way to his ears. His eyes also cracked open at the same time. On his forehead, there was a giant inverted vertical eye that didn't look like a human's. You! Gongsun Shishui instantly assumed a vigilant posture. This Gongsun Shiyu in front of him tilted his head, looking at Gongsun Shishui with a strange posture. Shishui, what are you doing? This was not only Gongsun Shiyu's voice. There seemed to be another sharp voice mixed in with his voice. You are not Shiyu, what are you? Me? Gongsun Shiyu opened his bloody mouth, grinning viciously. I am Gongsun Shiyu. Gongsun Shiyu is me. Shishui, don't you recognize me? Gongsun Shishui did not hesitate, quickly sending a palm strike towards Gongsun Shiyu. However, he did not expect that Gongsun Shiyu had another terrifying power erupting from his body. With a wave of his hand, he sent Gongsun Shishui flying backwards, heavily injured and spitting out blood. Gongsun Shiyu's meridians were all broken, and his life force was gone. He could not have this kind of power. Gongsun Shishui frowned, thinking for a moment. Without hesitation, he turned around and dashed away. But at this moment, Gongsun Shiyu reached out and grabbed Gongsun Shishui. You seem to have something good on you, Shishui. Shouldn't you give it to me? I am your master. Gongsun Shiyu slapped Gongsun Shishui's chest. He was knocked to the ground again, and this time, Gongsun Shiyu had a blood-red bead in his palm. Gongsun Shiyu held the bead between his fingers, looking at it and laughing strangely. Soul-generating bead, you took it away during the chaos, right? What do you want to do with it? What are you? Gongsun Shishui shouted angrily. But Gongsun Shiyu directly swallowed the bead. In an instant, the thick aura around Gongsun Shiyu became even thicker, and a huge amount of life force erupted from his body. The surging life force, along with the thick aura, rushed into Gongsun Shiyu's body. Not long after, Gongsun Shiyu appeared in front of Gongsun Shishui, his face full of evil. Soul-generating bead is a good thing. The evil Gongsun Shiyu chuckled. Then, 1,000,000 soul-generating beads. I want them too. At this moment, Gongsun Shishui suddenly waved his palm, chopping towards Gongsun Shiyu's leg. Humph! But Gongsun Shiyu snorted coldly, his hand forming a sword finger, and swept it. A dark red sword light flashed, and Gongsun Shishui's left arm was cut off. Gongsun Shishui screamed miserably, the veins on his face bulging, and he clutched the place where his arm was cut off. If you don't want to die, then be my lackey. Gongsun Shiyu sneered. The people of Xianyuan Palace's Gongsun clan are stronger than ants. He strode into the thick fog and didn't look back. Trash, follow me. At this moment, Gongsun Shishui was drenched in cold sweat, and his heart was in turmoil. But as if there was an irresistible will, he stood up, trembling, and followed the other party's footsteps while enduring the pain. In front of him, the evil Gongsun Shiyu seemed to be muttering to himself, "It's time to settle the debt of the past." Shinryu, I crawled back from the underworld. After a while, the long Shirua needed to stop. It consumed a lot of energy to continuously bleed and create a body. In the thick fog, the young long Shirua sat cross-legged on the edge of a stream. But at this moment, her heart palpitated inexplicably. With a surprised expression, she opened her eyes instantly and looked up at a certain direction. From that place there was an enormous, majestic, and domineering aura that could look down on the world soaring into the sky. Emperor's sword. She stood up abruptly with an inconceivable expression. Emperor's sword, how could it appear at this moment? It shouldn't be. Oh no, the Emperor's sword is out. Zijuan Long Shirua shook her head, holding the bead in her hands. The body created instantly wrapped around her, and then she turned into a golden light and flew away. After the battle in the giant pit, Long Shiruo, who was infuriated by the madness of the Kelowna realm of Taoists and monsters, left. Su Zijuan took Jessica back to the villa that was one of the products of Xianyuan Palace. The old dirty turtle Chichi Kamaya and Ghost Baby had already arrived. Chichi Kamaya was busy decocting medicine to replenish blood for Long Shiruo. At the same time, he was also busy treating the little butterfly monster Luo Dance, who was released from the Wangue Pagoda, and the last patient, Xiao Xingma, the governor of Ghost City. After checking that Luo Dance's condition had stabilized, Su Zijuan directly bit her wrist and let Luo Dance drink a few drops of blood. The little butterfly monster's breath gradually became better, but it would take some time for her to wake up. Xiao Xingma didn't have such a good treatment. He could only rely on absorbing the ghost energy in the Wangue Pagoda to heal himself. Although it was still foggy outside, there was a rare sense of safety in the villa. At least, Jessica thought so. Under the continuous fatigue, she also had a rare rest. But at this time, the sound of something breaking suddenly came from the room where Su Zijuan was resting. Jessica was stunned. She quickly ran to the next room and broke into the door. Then she was shocked. "Master?" Su Zijuan hugged her body, trembling and kneeling on the ground. Her fangs seemed to be out of control. Her eyes turned blood-red. Her face was pale and twisted with pain. She seemed to be suffering from extreme pain. "Master!" Jessica walked to Su Zijuan with concern. Unexpectedly, Su Zijuan went crazy at this time. She hit Jessica's chest with her palm. This foreign beauty's towering breasts were slapped down. Jessica spat out a mouthful of blood. Then she broke through the door and flew back to the back room. If she hadn't reached the inhuman stage, she would have been killed by this palm. But now she was seriously injured and couldn't get up. "Princess! Elder sister!" Chichi Kamaya and Ghost Baby came after hearing the sound. Seeing Su Zijuan's crazy appearance, they were both shocked. However, before they could react, Su Zijuan went berserk once again. Her majestic demonic energy instantly blew up the entire mansion. "Leave me alone! Take her away!" In madness, Su Zijuan shouted with all her strength. Chichi Kamaya and Ghost Baby were shocked. But at this time, a golden light came from the thick fog in the sky. A huge dragon's shadow hovered above the villa. "It's Lord Long." In the sky, Long Shiruo didn't care about Chichi Kamaya and Ghost Baby. She turned into a golden light and shot down. In the golden light, the body created by the explosion of power pressed on Su Zijuan's forehead. It seemed to ease the madness of Su Zijuan. Old woman! You, stupid girl! I told you not to let you become a drought demon, but you didn't listen. Now you're in trouble." Long Shiruo's voice was anxious and scared. "Do you think it's so easy to suppress the god-slaying sword? Don't talk. Use all your strength to suppress the agitation of the god-slaying sword in your body. I can't hold on for long." Su Zijuan gritted her teeth. But after listening to Long Shiruo's words, she closed her eyes. At this time, Kelowna and Shinryu used all their strength. Su Zijuan's violent demonic power also calmed down little by little. Her demonic appearance also gradually returned to normal. The creation chi could only last for 5 minutes at most, and the strength of Long Shiruo's outburst would reduce this time. At this time, the creation body had almost exhausted the upper limit of the power that it could reach. However, the creation body couldn't continue for more than a minute and could only withdraw. But now Su Zijuan could rely on her own strength to calm the chaos in her body. Long Shiruo was relieved and returned to the appearance of a child. She subconsciously glanced at Chichi Kamaya's secret treasure. She didn't know when a crack appeared on the pearl. At this moment, Chichi Kamaya, who hurried forward, seemed to have noticed the situation of the pearl. After all, this turtle pearl appeared with his birth. Long Shiruo looked at Chichi Kamaya and shook her head imperceptibly. Chichi Kamaya could only sigh. Then he came to Su Zijuan and asked with concern, "How is the princess?" When the emperor's sword appeared, the killing god in her body resonated and went out of control. Long Shirua shook her head, but the Emperor's sword only appeared for a moment and then stopped breathing. She should be fine in a short time. Emperor's sword. Chichikamaya was shocked. Wasn't this Emperor's sword lost with the great Qin Empire? Why did it suddenly appear after 2,000 years? How do I know? Long Shirua said impatiently. I'm just Long Shirua, not the almighty dragon. Don't ask me everything. Chichikamaya sighed. After a moment of silence, he turned back and looked at Ghost Baby. Ghost Baby, take Miss Jessica for treatment. Leave this place to me and Lord Long. Also, tell Castellan Shao that everything is fine for now. In other words, he didn't want anyone to disturb them. Although Ghost Baby was reluctant, he still helped Jessica up and walked into the part of the villa that was still intact. Long Shirua had returned to the appearance of a child, but she was still watching Su Zijuan closely. She held the turtle pearl tightly in her hand. You shouldn't have let her be born, Long Shirua said faintly. Chichikamaya kept silent. He turned his head and said in a low voice, Princess, you've become the Shinryu and got rid of Xuanyuan's destiny. But now you've fallen into another destiny. But for Xianyuan Palace, the inheritance of the human sovereign can't be cut off. Chapter 11:26. This place was empty and it was quiet all around. With the thick fog, they could even see the chaos caused by people leaving in a hurry. Probably for the timid, going deep into this place would be very challenging for the nerves. Of course, this was only for ordinary people. Obviously, the people walking here at this moment were not ordinary people, Gong Sunhua and Gong Fanqing. Fortunately, there are not many changes around here. Gong Sunhua looked around and sighed. I didn't expect that 500 years have passed. I remember that there used to be a big tree here. Gong Fanqing rolled her eyes at this guy. Now is not the time for you to be sad. The aura of the Supreme One is faintly discernible. Why did it weaken so much in the past hundreds of years? Here we are. Gong Sunhua frowned, but suddenly stopped and looked up. In the thick fog, there was an ancient mansion. The two words Song Mansion were written on the door plate of the mansion. It was the ancestral mansion of the Song family. The two broke the door and walked all the way to an ancient well in the abandoned backyard of the Song family's ancestral mansion. Before going into the ancient well, Gong Sunhua frowned. Someone should have lived here for a while not long ago. The house should have been renovated. Gong Fanqing said quickly, maybe the descendant of the Supreme One came back. But looking at the thick fog, he should have taken refuge. Gong Sunhua nodded, and then jumped into the ancient well first, followed by Gong Fanqing. The two soon landed at the bottom of the ancient well. The two lit up the mechanism in the ancient well, illuminating the surroundings, and walked through the ancient well with great familiarity. As they walked through the huge building at the bottom of the ancient well, the two had a dignified look on their faces. Because they had found traces of activity in the building at the bottom of the ancient well, it was reasonable to say that someone had been in the ancestral mansion of the Song family, and it was the descendant of the Song family. But it was very strange that there were traces of activity at the bottom of the ancient well. Of course, 500 years had passed. Although anything could happen, it was still possible. However, the traces of activity at the bottom of the ancient well were clearly recent. In fact, the two of them determined that it happened at the same time as the Song family's ancestral mansion. Did the descendants of the Song family discover the secret in the ancient well? But it didn't seem to be so. This was because there were no traces of human intrusion in the deepest part of the ancient well. What's going on? Why is the spiritual energy in the earth vein so weak? Gong Fanqing finally noticed something amiss. At this time, the two of them had already entered the deepest part of the tomb, which was also the most important place, the tomb chamber where a stone coffin was located. I'm afraid it has been broken for many years. Gong Sunhua frowned. No wonder your honor's aura is so weak. With that, Gong Sunhua took a deep breath and walked to the front of the sarcophagus with a solemn expression. He lifted the lid of the sarcophagus with both hands. Inside the sarcophagus was a middle-aged man in a yellow robe. His face was haggard, and a strong death chi surged out as the lid of the sarcophagus was lifted. Gong Fanqing and Gong Sunhua were both God's favored sons who had once stirred up a storm in the world. Their cultivation was also outstanding, so the invasion of the death chi didn't cause much trouble for them. Your Honor's divine soul is too weak, it's almost dried up. Gong Fanqing was shocked at this time. Hua, you and I, one for each of us, replenish some of your Honor's soul power first. Otherwise, your Honor's remaining spiritual consciousness may not be preserved. Gong Sunhua also realized the seriousness of the matter, so without saying anything, he lifted the arm of the man in the yellow robe in the sarcophagus, palm to palm, and began to transfer his soul power. Humans had 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls. If a person lost any of the spiritual souls or physical souls, he or she would have the symptoms of losing one's soul. If it was a light case, he or she would become a muddle-headed person, and if it was a serious case, he or she would fall into a coma. If it wasn't for his or her cultivation, no one dared to use his or her soul power. Gong Fanqing did the same at this time. She used her palm to block the other palm of the man in the yellow robe. Not long after, wisps of white smoke slowly emerged from the foreheads of the 2 people. Both of them were sweating profusely, but their faces were red. This transfer took half a day. Until they were exhausted, they had no choice but to let go of the man in the yellow robe's hand. Both of them didn't look good at this time, which showed that they had just recovered from a serious illness. On the other hand, the man in the yellow robe in the sarcophagus looked ruddy, as if he was a few years younger. At this time, he slowly opened his eyes. Seeing that the man in the yellow robe woke up, Gong Fanqing and Gong Sunhua walked to the bottom of the sarcophagus and knelt down. "Welcome back, Your Honor." Their voices were not loud, but the man in the yellow robe heard it very clearly. But he just woke up, and his eyes were very unfocused. After waking up, he looked down at the thing in his hand. It was a piece of jade rui. After a long time, he slowly opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "How long have I slept?" Gong Sunhua and Gong Fanqing looked at each other. Gong Sunhua quickly said, "Your Honor, since Fanqing and I entered Penglai, 500 years have passed in the outside world. But today, it seems that there is no longer a dynasty, but a new collective power called the government." 500 years? The man in the yellow robe frowned. This time seemed to be out of his expectation. He seemed to be trying hard to recall something. "It seems that someone came and said something to me, something like that. Your Honor, before Hua and I entered your chamber, we saw traces of people moving in the mansion above. It is very likely that your descendants have come back." The man in the yellow robe nodded and turned his head to look at a memorial tablet in front of the tomb with Song Chongqing written on it. "Yes, my dynasty has been protected by one of the 12 ancestral dragon veins of Kelowna. It has been a royal family for thousands of years, and its bloodline has never stopped. Your Honor, when Fanqing and I left, the big array here was still working normally. It is reasonable to say that under the effect of the big array, the aura of Mount Tai should be continuously used to nourish Your Honor's divine soul. Why is Your Honor's divine soul weakened to such an extent? If Fanqing and I didn't come in time, Your Honor's divine soul would have been. I don't know." The man in the yellow robe shook his head. Suddenly, the aura of Mount Tai was cut off. "I could only rely on sleeping to reduce the consumption of my soul power. The other party just cut off my soul power, which meant that I was left to fend for myself. Why did you 2 come back after 500 years?" "Your Honor, you don't know," Gong Sunhua said quickly. "That year, when Your Honor gave us the key, Fanqing and I were able to enter Penglai. We didn't expect that this operation would be known by a sword practitioner. His name is Tai Bai, and people call him Green Lotus Sword Immortal. He is a peerless genius in the Tao querying state, but he has the attack power of the Tao fruit state. Tai Bai and I entered Peng Lai together, but we didn't expect that there had been a big change in Peng Lai. Fanxing and I were trapped in Peng Lai for several years, and we were able to get out earlier. However, we were already in heaven and earth. The flow of time in Peng Lai is different from the outside world. The man in the yellow robe listened silently, as if he was trying to distinguish the truth in Gongsun Wu's words. After a long time, he slowly said, "Now, what about Tai Bai?" Tai Bai disappeared after making a big scene in Peng Lai. No one knows whether he is alive or dead. Gong Fanxing then briefly told him what happened after they met Jiang Zhua. That year, I had no choice but to struggle with my last breath here. After that, I gave you two the key of Peng Lai, which has been passed down since ancient times, in order to let you go to Peng Lai and get the method of rebirth from the immortal of Peng Lai. The man in the yellow robe sighed slowly. It seems that the matter of reversing yin and yang and coming back from the dead is really very difficult. Is this fate? After saying this, the man in the yellow robe coughed softly, and his expression was quite painful. He was only supporting his body with his spirit, but this body had been cut off long ago. It was just a bag of skin. It had been withering all the time. "Your Honor." Gongsun Wu and Fanxing hurried forward. The man in the yellow robe waved his hand and said in a low voice, "It's too late to find another place to nourish my spirit. The only thing we can do now is to ask my descendants to fulfill their filial piety. I need fresh flesh and blood of the Zhao family's bloodline." But outside, under the influence of the Four Seasons glazed book, the sky is covered with thick fog. The area within hundreds of miles is like a deadland. Kelowna and the Taoist and monster realm seem to be planning something important. There is even the shadow of Xianyuan Palace in it. Gong Fanxing had to remind him, and this time, there is a strange change in the Peng Lai treasure house. There is a sea of people. We really don't know whether your descendants are alive or dead. It's okay. The man in the yellow robe shook his head. "Since they are my descendants, I can feel it. Let's go east. I can feel that they are not far away." Gongsun Wu and Gong Fanxing nodded. "Then, let's not waste any time. Let's act now." They couldn't let the man in the yellow robe die. Because once he died, they would lose their own souls. Their spirits were bound. Once the spirit of the man in the yellow robe was destroyed, their own spirits would be destroyed as well. Saving him was equivalent to saving themselves. Walking in the thick fog, Song Haoran suddenly stopped and looked in a certain direction thoughtfully. This action of stopping caused the bodyguards of the Song family behind him to nervously grip the weapons in their hands, fully focused on sensing everything around them. Their bodies were all implanted with a peculiar power called true power. This kind of true power would automatically activate a special ability called heaven vision and earth hearing, which greatly enhanced their perception and allowed them to see things in the fog within a certain range. It felt as if they were wearing night vision goggles. Of course, if the electronic devices in the fog didn't malfunction, they probably wouldn't need this so-called heaven vision and earth hearing technique. This was the true power that Princess Chu Yang injected into them. Song Haoran couldn't do this yet. This was the technique that Princess Chu Yang said the Great Qin Empire's cavalry used to kill the strange beasts outside the Great Wall. This technique couldn't be maintained forever. When the true power in everyone's body was used up, it would automatically disappear. The next time they wanted to use it, they had to inject more true power. Well, it was almost like using Princess Chu Yang as a power bank. This was what Song Haoran thought at that time. After obtaining the technique to walk in the fog, he quickly left some people to protect his father and Song Ying while he led the rest into the fog to look for the other warriors of the Song family who were lost. "What's going on?" Seeing that Song Haoran was acting a little strange, Princess Chu Yang frowned. She was still 3 meters away from Song Haoran. Now, Song Haoran's control over the distance was far better than before. This distance of 3 meters had never been increased or decreased by an inch. This made Princess New Dawn rather dissatisfied, but she didn't show it. Nothing, I just suddenly had a strange feeling. Song Howren shook his head and said, I can't describe it, but I feel that it's not something good. When one cultivates martial arts or Tao to a certain extent, one will occasionally have a sudden impulse. Princess Chu Yang said indifferently, perhaps it's related to oneself, or perhaps it's related to one's family. Song Howren frowned and said, Princess, you mean, my father and Song Ing will be in danger? Princess Chu Yang said expressionlessly, perhaps you will be in danger. This fog is strange to begin with. Song Howren shrugged. However, he still gave the order to have the two of them return to the hotel where his father and Song Ing were staying for the time being. He would wait in the same place. They hadn't been out for a long time, only about an hour. It wouldn't take long for them to go and come back. At this moment, Song Howren looked at Princess Chu Yang, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, seemingly concentrating. He suddenly smiled and said, Princess, you said that only when one's martial arts reach a certain level will they have a sudden impulse. Does that mean that my martial arts have also reached a certain level? Princess Chu Yang looked indifferently at Song Howren. In the past, even the cavalry captain with the lowest level of martial arts in the Great Qin Empire had a higher level of martial arts than you. They had been cultivating for tens of years without stopping. How could they be compared to you, who only cultivated for 1 or 2 days? You are simply too stupid. But who was young Master Song? That shameless skill was simply hundreds or thousands of times more powerful than the cultivation of the Babel floating diagram in her body. Young Master Song squinted his eyes and smiled. Your Highness, has anyone ever told you that your cold appearance is very sexy? Lecture. Princess Chu Yang snorted coldly. This man was not only a scoundrel, he was even shameless. How could there be such a person in the world? And he even had the appearance of an emperor. The heavens were simply blind. I am speaking the truth. Song Howren smiled faintly and said, This cold sexiness, even I am a bit moved. I am so moved that I want to introduce you to Luochio. It seems like I can really consider it. I keep feeling that with his personality, he can also get along well with you. Luochio. Princess Chu Yang frowned. When she had just woken up, she didn't seem to care about the things around her, but she remembered them all in her heart. She had vaguely heard this name a few times in the Song family. It seemed that this was a person that the entire Song family cared about very much. He is a person who will very quietly listen to my stories. Song Howren's face was full of smiles at this time. He is really very likable. It is a pity that I am a man. Princess Chu Yang. Her Highness looked up and down at Song Howren with a strange gaze. Then she frowned and said rather seriously, The seclusion of Longyang has existed since ancient times. I didn't think that you would actually. Song Howren laughed loudly and said, If a man is gentler than a woman, naturally there would be nothing for you women to do, right? Her Highness suddenly felt a chill. Chapter 11:27. They didn't have to wait for too long. The two Song family members quickly returned and brought back news that Dad and Song Ing were safe. They also said that the people at the hotel had found a cellar in the hotel. For safety's sake, they had hidden in the cellar. Dad had traveled extensively and had rich experience. It was just that he had gradually handed over the mercenary group business to Song Howren in recent years and retired to the second line. His ability to command on the spot was still very sufficient. Song Howren's appearance still didn't show anything, but he secretly relaxed a lot. A relatively good news was also brought back by a Song family soldier who went out to investigate. While waiting, Song Howren also sent out a few soldiers to search nearby. They found the secret signal left by the Song family soldiers who were lost. The Song family's mercenary group, in the underground world, wandered around the world where the flames of war were raging. They also occasionally encountered battlefields such as tropical jungles and barren deserts. For this reason, The Song family naturally had a unique set of secret signals used to distinguish between friend and foe. The scariest thing for a search was naturally to have no result. At this time, with the news of their teammates, the soldiers who came out were all shocked. They almost didn't have parents. Song Tianyu was their second parent. They didn't have brothers or sisters. They trained together in the village, and came out of the school together with everyone's brothers and sisters. Going to the place where the secret signal was very smooth. Once again, according to the instructions of the secret signal, with the help of the heaven vision and earth listening technique, they successfully found the place where the Song family soldiers were hiding without much effort. It was a medical station in a small town. Next to the medical station was a small supermarket. There was a basic supply of medicine and a source of food. Although the thick fog was bad, it didn't affect the mood of the Song family soldiers hiding here. After all, in order to ambush the target, it was common to lurk in the swamp for a few days and nights. When Song Hauran suddenly pried open a door of the medical station, the soldiers hiding here were using an alcohol lamp and cotton candy as snacks to pass the time. The sudden sound of the door being broken made everyone nervous for a while. They picked up their weapons at the fastest speed. There were even some who had superb reflexes and instantly fired a shot at the door. But when he saw who was at the door, he suddenly felt a burst of panic. What was even more surprising was that Song Hauran only tilted his head slightly in the face of this sudden bullet. It was a sudden swing of his head. The bullet flew past his ear and hit the ceiling behind him. Young Master Song whistled, then closed the door again. He turned his head and said loudly, "Don't worry, I'm fine." As he spoke, Song Hauran knocked on the door twice, then opened the door and smiled. "Hello, everybody." The soldier who fired first opened his mouth at this time, then sighed heavily, rolled his eyes and said, "Military advisor, can you not avoid all the warnings and show off your skills? It's better this way. The security perimeter is pretty good, it's not rusty at all. But you almost shot me to the end of my life." Song Hauran laughed. "Okay, don't stay here. Come out, we need to find other people. I found a way to move in the thick fog." Hearing this, everyone packed up their equipment. In less than 10 seconds, they were ready to go. But at this time, Song Hauran heard another gunshot coming from outside. Princess Chuyang had been following Song Hauran. When Song Hauran walked into the medical station, she frowned at the same time and looked at Song Hauran. "Be careful, there seems to be a master outside." "How strong?" Song Hauran asked subconsciously. Princess Chuyang said solemnly, "It's hard to say." Song Hauran was startled, then frowned. At this time, several soldiers had walked out of the room and looked at Song Hauran. Young Master Song closed his eyes at this time, then opened them again a few seconds later and quickly chose a few people. "One of you go to the right corridor, one of you go to the left corridor, bring a sniper. You stay here, set up and wait for my orders. The rest follow me." The place was the lobby of the medical station. When Song Hauran and the others arrived, the scene in front of them made Song Hauran and the others gasp. This time, a total of 7 Song family soldiers came out. At this time, they fell one after another. Some of their bodies crashed into the wall, smashing the wall into pieces, and some were smashed into the ceiling above their heads. Their necks were still open on the ceiling, their bodies hanging like this, blood dripping down. At this time, the last Song family soldier, who was still struggling, had his forehead pinched by a big hand. "You monster!" He crazily pulled the trigger of the submachine gun in his hand. Bullets kept spitting out, dozens of bullets all hit the owner of that big hand, a tall and sturdy man in ancient costume. But at the same time, this Song family soldier's head was directly crushed by this tall and sturdy man. The tall and sturdy man casually threw this Song family soldier on the ground, then took a deep breath. Those bullets that shot into his body were actually squeezed out by his muscles at this moment. Perhaps the bullets originally did not shoot into his body, but were just squeezed by his muscles. This is a modern weapon. The power is not bad. This tall and sturdy man seemed to be quite interested at this time. He picked up the submachine gun from the dead Song family soldier's hand and carefully looked at it. I remember there was also a flintlock gun in the past. The principle seems to be similar. The submachine gun in this tall and sturdy man's hand was suddenly broken. He slowly turned his head. At this moment, Song Howren slowly walked out of the corridor. Song Howren saw this tall and sturdy man. He also saw a beautiful woman behind the tall and sturdy man, and a middle-aged man wearing a dragon robe. The middle-aged man's face was quite pale, but his body had a kind of high and mighty temperament. Song family's eldest son glanced at those fallen Song family soldiers who had lost their breath. His face was calm. Instead he chuckled. "What day is it today? Is it a good day to shoot an ancient costume drama?" That tall and sturdy man and the beautiful woman behind him were quite surprised to see Song Howren appear. At this time, the yellow-robed man's sickly expression was quite refreshed. A trace of light flashed in his eyes. The yellow-robed man softly said, "The sun's horns and dragon's face. The appearance of the sun, the disposition of the dragon wind. What an emperor's face, what an emperor's face. I didn't expect that after 1,000 years, there would be a descendant of the emperor's face." A kind of strange impact, at this time, made Song Howren suddenly have a kind of dizziness. He slightly shook his head to shake off the dizziness in his mind, frowning. "Who are you people?" That yellow-robed man indifferently said, "Are you the descendant of Song family?" Song Howren didn't say anything. The yellow-robed man said again, "Since you are the descendant of Song family, then do you know the real origin of Song family? I am your ancestor." Ancestor? Yes, all the descendants of the Song family are my descendants. The yellow-robed man's voice seemed to have a kind of strange magic. At this moment Song Howren's eyelids slightly drooped. He saw the yellow-robed man's kind face, slowly opening his hands. "Since you are my descendant, why don't you come to my side? Return to my knees?" Song Howren seemed to take a step very reluctantly. His face showed a hint of struggle, but this trace of struggle was instantly erased. His face became dull. Step by step, he slowly walked to the yellow-robed man. That yellow-robed man was even more satisfied at this time, nodding with a smile. "Your vitality is like a billowing smoke signal. Very good, very good. You are really my outstanding descendant." Song Howren still stood there expressionlessly. At this moment, the yellow-robed man's pale face suddenly showed a touch of purple. This purple breath gradually turned black. His eyes were also instantly dyed black at the same time, looking very strange. At the same time, he stretched out his palm. At this moment, in the middle of the palm, a hole suddenly split open. A mouth full of sharp teeth actually appeared in the palm. This horrifying palm, at this moment, slowly stretched out to Song Howren. In front of him, it seemed that an extremely horrifying ceremony was taking place. But at the moment when the yellow-robed man's palm was about to touch Song Howren's heart, Song Howren's eyes suddenly brightened. After that, he pulled out his pistol with lightning speed, aiming the muzzle at the strange mouth in the yellow-robed man's palm. Bang! The sound of a bullet being shot out. The yellow-robed man immediately withdrew his palm, showing a trace of pain on his face, and grasped his wrist. At the same time, he was furious. Seeing this, the strong man beside him didn't say anything and swept his arm horizontally. Song Howren's reaction was also very fast, retracting both his arms and raising them in front of his body, but the strength of this strong man's arm was extremely terrifying. Song Howren was pushed back by the force of this sweep. Until he hit the wall, he was able to stop. "You've been awake all this time?" The yellow-robed man snorted coldly. At this moment, Song Howren swung his arms with an evil look on his face. "After all, I don't want to welcome the end of my life so soon." "So, you said you're my ancestor? This is interesting. My ancestor's corpse actually came back to life." Great heaven-swallowing spell of desolation. Suddenly, A clear and melodious female voice slowly rang out. It was Princess New Dawn's voice. Song Howren was already used to hearing this, so he wasn't surprised at this time. But the yellow-robed man and the other two, after hearing this voice, their faces slightly changed, looking at the corridor together. Princess Chu-Yang walked out expressionlessly, sizing up the yellow-robed man, and said indifferently, "You're practicing the great heaven-swallowing spell of desolation. The first evil skill in the world. The practitioner doesn't recognize his relatives, and uses his relatives as cauldrons. The closer he is to his relatives, the stronger the power he brings. I didn't expect someone to practice such an evil skill that defies humanity." Using his relatives as food? Song Howren couldn't help but reveal a shocked expression. He trusted this Princess Chu-Yang more. Princess Chu-Yang frowned and said, "Martial cultivation is different from Tao cultivation. A martial cultivator emphasizes a strong body of qi and blood, but even if the physical body can continuously break through, allowing the qi and blood to grow endlessly, there will still be a limit. Before the ultimate treasure of the human body is opened, it will still decline. Of course, there are various methods to extend the lifespan of a martial cultivator. There are also some humans who are born with a strong bloodline who can live longer, but they are still far inferior to Taoists who are successful in Tao cultivation. However, there are also benefits to martial cultivation. For example, you can obtain a strong power early, but your qi and blood will be greatly depleted before you can cultivate endlessly. This evil skill was originally created to replenish the innately depleted qi and blood. It uses the qi and blood of one's relatives to replenish one's body, and there is no rejection. Therefore, it is ranked as the first evil skill in the world." "Heh, you know a lot?" The beautiful woman beside the yellow-robed man smiled faintly. Princess Chu-Yang was unmoved. There were demons who practiced the great wasteland-swallowing heaven scripture, but they were later suppressed by the Xianyuan Palace. This evil skill should be destroyed. Of course, it is not impossible for the Xianyuan Palace to keep it. But I am curious why the Xianyuan Palace would allow such an evil skill to be circulated. The yellow-robed man took a deep breath, and the purplish-black color on his face gradually disappeared. However, his face seemed to have become paler. "You two, capture this boy for me. As for this girl, she seems to have an extraordinary background. Capture her for me too." He was originally a demon who had stirred up a storm of blood in both the Taoist and demon realms. Hearing this, Gongsun Wu laughed nastily. "Miss, you seem to know a lot of secrets of the Xianyuan Palace. I really want to discuss it with you." Hearing this, Princess Chu-Yang snorted coldly and turned to one side. "Rude guy. Song Howren, teach this guy a lesson for me." Song Howren blinked his eyes. Just now, when he blocked this strong man's arm, his hand bones seemed to be broken. Although he looked relaxed, he was in so much pain that he almost died. How should I beat him, however? At this moment, the expressions of Gongsun Wu, Gong Fanxing, and the yellow-robed man all changed slightly. Princess Chu-Yang also frowned in an instant. At this moment, Song Howren was seized by a sudden impulse. A strong sense of danger sent a chill down his spine. Almost instinctively, he pounced forward, hugged Princess Chu-Yang, and rolled away on the ground. "Be careful, my lord!" Gongsun Wu and Gong Fanxing shouted at the same time, and the two of them guarded beside the yellow-robed man. At this moment, a green light broke the ceiling of the medical station and slashed down fiercely. The huge airwave instantly overturned everything in this place. When the green light fell, it divided into countless tiny green sword lights, and shot out again. In just a moment, the lobby of the medical station was full of holes. And on the broken ceiling, a white figure slowly descended from the sky. She came with a sword in her hand. Her face was cold, but her eyes were as sharp as a sword out of its sheath. Soon, she found Gong Fanxing and Gongsun Wu here. At this moment, she said coldly, Finally, I found you too. It's you. Gong Fanqing opened her mouth. Chapter 11:28. Song Haoran forcefully pushed away a piece of gravel on his body. He glanced at Princess Chuyang, who was lying on the ground. There was no injury. But there was one bad thing. Sui Ho Zhu had fallen into the hands of Princess Chuyang. Probably at the moment when he threw her down, Princess Chuyang was looking at Song Haoran with a playful look. Song Haoran took a deep breath, saying affectionately, "Princess, you've seen my body. You have to be responsible for me. If you don't get up, I'll tear you into pieces." Princess Chuyang just sneered. Song Haoran shrugged, continuing to push away the gravel on his body. Meanwhile, he looked at the situation in the lobby of the medical station. There was no doubt that this place was a bit chaotic because of the sudden appearance of the woman in white holding a sword. But based on the principle that the enemy of an enemy could become a friend, Song Haoran didn't take any action for the time being. In the corridor, several members of the Song family had been lying in ambush. At this moment, when they saw Song Haoran's eyes, they hid more carefully. On the other side, in fact, Song Haoran and Princess Chuyang's little tricks didn't escape the eyes of the yellow-robed man, Gong Sunhua and Gong Fanqing, but they didn't have time to care about it at this moment. Facing the woman in white, Qin Chuyu's oppressive feeling, the yellow-robed man couldn't help frowning. "Who's this woman?" Gong Fanqing smiled slightly. "Your Honor, she's the disciple of Tai Bai I mentioned to you before. It's said that this woman used to be a fairy fox of the demon clan. She was already an 8-tailed fairy fox, but she was willing to give up her demon body and become a mortal body. I found some time to have some small grudges with her, but I didn't expect this little girl to chase after me so relentlessly." The yellow-robed man nodded, saying indifferently, "If so, then I'll leave it to you." Gong Fanqing nodded, then turned to Qin Chuyu, smiling charmingly. "Little girl, you're asking me to teach you some moves so soon? Although you've learned a little bit of Tai Bai's swordsmanship, it's still not enough." Qin Chuyu sneered. She didn't have much of an expression on her face as she slowly swung the green lotus sword in her hand. The sound of the sword humming was clear and cold, like the sound of a green bamboo that could cleanse a person's heart. Inside the medical station, countless green lights were swimming around. They were actually strands of substantial sword energy. Song Haoran was confused by the sword chi, but he could vaguely feel their sharpness. However, Princess Chuyang's expression changed slightly, revealing a serious expression. On the other side, Gong Fanqing and Gong Sunhua also sensed the extraordinariness of these sword lights. Gong Fanqing narrowed her eyes. "You've improved again in such a short time." At this moment, Qin Chuyu said indifferently, "You may have misunderstood one thing. This sword is still my master's sword. I can only exert 10% or 20% of its power, and that's only for now." "Ho, little girl, are you going to risk your life to fight with me?" Gong Fanqing said calmly. In the Penglai treasure house, Qin Chuyu couldn't activate the Green Lotus sword song to this extent. Seeing the strength of the sword chi, Gong Fanqing couldn't help but wonder if Qin Chuyu had used some secret method to forcibly improve her power. Of course, this kind of secret method was usually accompanied by great side effects. "Risk my life?" Qin Chuyu shook her head. "I can exert it to this extent. I said you misunderstood because you didn't know who was outside the square of Penglai Palace at that time. It wasn't that Qin Chuyu didn't want to exert the power of the Green Lotus Sword Song to the greatest extent, it was just that the Green Lotus Sword Song resisted and was extremely unwilling to do so. Although Qin Chuyu criticized the behavior of the Green Lotus Sword Song, she couldn't say anything about it since it was her master's sword. But it was different now. Because a certain boss wasn't here, the arrogance of the Green Lotus Sword Song came back in an instant. Last time, the power of the Green Lotus Sword Song was less than 1,000th. Qin Chuyu snorted coldly. The Green Lotus Sword Song swung the sword, and the green sword chi that was wandering in all directions stopped in an instant. They turned around and pointed at Gong Fanqing. "Ho! I'd like to see how much Tai Bai's favorite disciple has learned from him. Gong Fanqing's body instantly emitted several huge waves of true power. The sect that she used to belong to was one of the very few sects that cultivated martial arts. Wu Wa, keep an eye on his honor. I'll fight with this little girl. Gong Fanqing shot up to the sky and rushed to the sky above the medical station. Qin Chuyu followed closely. Those hundreds and thousands of green sword qi also shot up to the sky at this moment, which was extremely spectacular. Song Haoran whistled and put down his hand from his eyebrows. It seems that the real enemy has come. Song Haoran actually knew how to judge the situation and size up the situation. Every time he went out for a mission, he might encounter unexpected things. Although he was usually careless, if he couldn't guarantee or try his best to preserve his own people in danger, he wouldn't be able to gradually gain the recognition of the warriors of the Song family. At this moment, the woman in white appeared to challenge the yellow-robed man and took away one of the yellow-robed man's people, which naturally reduced a lot of pressure for Song Haoran, the yellow-robed man who claimed to be the ancestor, and the strong man Gong Sun Wua were left. Perhaps Qin Chuyu was much more powerful than when she was in the Penglai treasure house, but Gong Sun Wua believed that Gong Fanqing could still solve the problem. Gong Sun Wua still decided to carry out the order from the yellow-robed man. He needed the yellow-robed man to live well. Gong Sun Wua sneered at this moment, and his figure flashed out. This kind of speed from extreme stillness to extreme movement surprised Song Haoran. When he reacted, he only felt that there was a strong force coming from the side of his body. Gong Sun Wua kicked out a very simple whip kick, and Song Haoran could only withdraw his arms to block it. This was because he had a kind of super intuition. His intuition had already exceeded his own reaction ability, so he could block Gong Sun Wua's unexpected super-fast attack. You're a good warrior. Gong Sun Wua grinned at this time. Don't worry, I won't break you. After all, you have to contribute everything to the Lord. It's a pity if you die. Although Song Haoran took this whip kick, he still couldn't resist the powerful force of Gong Sun Wua. His body was swept directly into the wall again. Hearing this, young Master Song wiped the bloodstain on his lips with his finger, a game of cat and mouse. It seems that I'm the mouse this time. Gong Sun Wua clenched his fists, and at the same time secretly paid attention to Princess Chuyang's movements. However, he found that Princess Chuyang didn't care about this at all, as if she didn't care about Song Haoran's life at all. At this time, Gong Sun Wua attacked Song Haoran again. Young Master Song took a deep breath, and when he was about to fight to death, he suddenly heard the voice of Princess Chuyang. Relax your mind, don't think about anything. However, to Gong Sun Wua's surprise, Song Haoran successfully resisted again. Not only that, Song Haoran's body even twisted strangely, and from a tricky angle, he punched towards Gong Sun Wua's Qihai acupoint. The power of this punch wasn't enough to break Gong Sun Wua's protective true power, but it made Gong Sun Wua stunned, because at this moment, he felt that this punch contained 9 forces in succession. The forces overlapped one after another, and finally the 9 forces overlapped, and the power was extraordinary. 9 Phoenix dance strikes? Gong Sun Wua frowned and said in surprise, You also know the martial arts of Xianyuan Palace? Song Haoran didn't answer, and once again punched out in an extremely exquisite way. It was still the same strange way of exerting force, which caught Gong Sun Wua off guard. Song Haoran forced Gong Sun Wua to retreat for the first time. Young Master Song didn't feel happy at this time, because at this time, although he was the one who punched out, it wasn't his own will that controlled it. Because Princess Chuyang was secretly controlling his body. It was as if another person had entered his brain. Princess Chuyang. This was a very wonderful feeling, as if Princess Chuyang's consciousness had entered his body and completely gained control of his body. Whether it was the flow of true power in his body, or the techniques used to attack Gong Sun Wua, everything seemed to have been tempered thousands of times. At this time, under the control of Princess Chuyang's will, Song Howren's palms danced, and countless palm shadows appeared. Facing the countless palm shadows, Gongsun Wua showed a serious expression for the first time. Exquisite palm, Heaven's Dragon Claw, Flying Star 9 Rotation Seal, Innate 8 Trigrams Universe Palm. Gongsun Wua said the names of more than 10 different martial arts, and there were even some that he couldn't recognize. What made Gongsun Wua excited was that these palm shadows weren't just for show, but each of them had reached a higher level. He was originally a martial arts fanatic. Now that he was able to see more than 10 or 20 exquisite palm techniques in one go, someone was able to use so many different palm techniques in an instant. Moreover, this palm technique was supported by the 9 Phoenix strikes, which really made his fighting instincts soar in an instant. Gongsun Wua laughed and punched out directly. The majestic domineering aura was like a fierce tiger that could swallow the sky, and it directly destroyed the crazy palm shadows. However, the palm shadows that Song Howren waved out with both hands became more and more complex, as if they were endless. Pure strength couldn't block Gongsun Wua's fist, but with superb skills, different palm techniques gathered into a big net, and forcibly entangled Gongsun Wua, so that Gongsun Wua didn't have the chance to fully release his powerful skills. Good boy. Why are you fighting like a woman? If you are a man, then fight with me for 300 rounds. Gongsun Wua shouted angrily, and his true power exploded, and he instantly broke free from the big net of palm techniques. This was originally a woman fighting with you. Song Howren thought to himself, but at this time, he didn't have time to argue with Gongsun Wua. Although the body was controlled by Princess Chuyang, the true power was still operated by his own body, including those exquisite palm techniques. Young Master Song was using his amazing memory to frantically record every movement of his body and every movement of his true power, so he didn't have time to care about anything else. However, Song Howren wasn't waving his palms at this time. Instead, he was wandering around Gongsun Wua, performing a series of different wonderful footwork. The transitions were like moving clouds and flowing water, without any sense of obscurity, and even more so, without any trace. When had Gongsun Wua ever fought such a boring fight? Obviously, he had an earth-shattering cultivation, but he was still confused by a guy who was at least 2 levels lower than him. He couldn't help but become angry out of humiliation. F***ck your mother! Gongsun Wua roared. His fist was no longer aimed at Song Howren, but hit the floor heavily. In an instant, more than half of the medical station collapsed, and the broken floor disrupted Song Howren's footwork. Gongsun Wua quickly seized this opportunity and punched Song Howren in the chest. Song Howren couldn't avoid this solid punch, and was directly blasted into the wreckage of the medical station. At this time, Gongsun Wua's fierceness had been aroused, and he stepped on the air and rushed into the wreckage of the medical station without saying anything. Ha 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 ha, boy, you are very good at tormenting others. Continue tormenting me. Let's see how many more moves you can use. At this time, because of Gongsun Wua's large-scale destruction, Princess Chuyang, who had retreated to the edge of the medical station, slowly opened her eyes and exhaled slowly. To be able to practice the shocking world fist to this extent, he is considered a genius. Is he walking the path of tyranny? As for Song Howren, she didn't care about him anymore. Although this man had taken her out of the underground palace, for Princess Chuyang, he was just a modern man who could be used and had some value. Although it was good to have the appearance of an emperor, it was fine to have a strange power. If he couldn't survive, everything would be in vain. Since ancient times, there were many people who had the appearance of an emperor, but there was only one who could really ascend to the throne in each era. If one couldn't become an emperor, even if he had the appearance of an emperor, he was just a little bit more than ordinary people. If he couldn't go far, he couldn't go far. Gong Sun Wua's punch had directly broken all the meridians in Song Haoran's body, so Princess Chu Yang withdrew her consciousness. She looked up and saw the yellow-robed man standing calmly on the other side of the medical station, frowning and thinking about something. At this time, the yellow-robed man just stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at this scene expressionlessly. He didn't care about the life and death of his descendants. "Kid, where are you hiding?" "Here." Gong Sun Wua, who had already revealed his ferocious nature, now waved his hand and raised his leg, hitting a huge stone and going deep into the medical station, which was still intact. With the aura, Gong Sun Wua could easily locate Song Haoran. But he just liked to play tricks like this. "Found you." Gong Sun Wua had a shocking momentum. In the corridor, it seemed that every inch of air was filled with his thick, solid qi. Song Haoran was leaning against the wall at the end of the corridor, spitting out blood continuously, watching Gong Sun Wua walking towards him step by step. "Kid, don't you want to hide any more?" "I'm tired, I don't want to move." Song Haoran shrugged with a miserable look, but he didn't beg for mercy. "It was only a few minutes, and I was almost squeezed dry." "Then just accept your death obediently," Gong Sun Wua said with a grim smile. "Don't worry, I won't kill you. So, you'd better give me more pleasure." Bang! At this moment, outside the corridor window, a loud sound was heard. At the same time, Gong Sun Wua's head was tilted instantly. But Gong Sun Wua straightened his head again, only to see a deformed bullet on his temple falling to the ground. Seeing this, Song Haoran couldn't help but open his mouth slightly. The bullet was shot by the hunter he had ordered to ambush earlier. He was using a powerful sniper rifle. The sniper ambushing in the corridor at this time pulled the trigger again in panic. With each gunshot, Gong Sun Wua's body swayed. But the bullet didn't hurt him at all. At the moment when another gunshot was heard, Gong Sun Wua suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed the bullet directly between his fingers. He threw the bullet out with a backhand, only to hear a miserable scream from the corridor. That sniper was obviously dead. Song Haoran narrowed his eyes. Seeing Gong Sun Wua moving forward again, he suddenly took a deep breath and rolled to the side. At the same time, the corridor was suddenly swallowed by the crazy explosion. This was the best explosive that the Song family could get. Rumble? Seeing the billowing smoke and the completely collapsed corridor, Song Haoran, who was blown away by the explosion, coughed and got up, but his face didn't look good, because a figure slowly walked out from the thick smoke.